No, she's in the right place because she's sitting next to
The
me.
time being 6:06 p.m. I call to order the Franklin Joint Budget Subcommittee meeting. Meetings are
Recording in
recorded.
progress.
Sorry, I went twice. Good, I'm good, Ken.
Do I have to start over?
Nope.
Nope.
Meetings are recorded by Franklin TV and shown on Comcast Channel 8 and Verizon Channel 28, as well as 29, as well as recorded by Franklin Matters. All right, so call to order. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes from April 16th, 2026.
Second. Do I have a second? Any objections? So moved.
We're going to vote on it.
Do we need to vote? Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, vote. You can do this, actually, because we have Gene out, do we have to do it by roll call?
If he's on Zoom, yes.
He's not on Zoom.
He's not on Zoom, I don't see him. Yeah, so you don't have to do a roll call.
Don't have to do roll call. All right.
Voice vote.
So, voice vote, so those who approve?
Aye.
Aye. Those
Opposed?
opposed? All right, ayes have it. All right, moving to agenda item 3, discussion of fiscal year 27 budget update, fiscal year 28 budget projection, and 5-year fiscal forecast.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chairman. I hope, just I guess a quick update for the folks that are online and haven't read the 3-page memo. So FY27 budget update. Unfortunately, the state legislative, the FY27 budget at the state level, we did see a small decrease in local aid. And as I mentioned here, about 170,000. As I mentioned here, you know, we should be able to make that budget gap up by the time we get to the November tax rate recap. I would note that I think the superintendent, I'm sure the school committee members know, but in the outside section of the 27 budget, they formally did reintroduce the Foundation Budget Commission. So that's going to be a really, really big deal. Obviously, they don't have dates. They don't have membership fully yet. There'll be a big spiel when they open up. There'll probably be like 25 members of the commission. They'll do listening sessions throughout the state. But this is the legislatures every 10 to 12 years, they get this back together, and this is guided where the report, I think, is being requested to be due back to the legislature sometime in 2028. So it's about a 2-year process, and this is exactly where the threat to hold harmless will certainly be. So people should pay attention to that. I put a link in here to the actual language. I did note in here that Rep. Roy and Senator Roush will be at the September 16th Town Council meeting, so if people want to join in on that, they should come to that. It's a good time to ask questions and for a review of the legislative session. And I did include in here the full FY26 local receipts, and the good news is we were 15.5% over projections. So that equates to roughly about 2.3 million over what we had projected. I would also note that the June collections, where we had all the events in town, and World Cup and Pride and 4th of July and Porch Fest and all the other things, Strawberry Stroll, that is not reflected in these numbers because the state is a month off from quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4, so the June numbers don't actually go into FY26. The June numbers are calculated into FY27. So if you look at these numbers, there was a very good May for local receipts for meals, taxes, and hotel taxes, and cannabis, and a few other items. So that's good news, right? I mean, we had projected 15.3 million. We collected 17.6. You know, that's really good. That's the FY27 budget update. Just timeline moving forward, Mr. Chairman, and to the committee. You know, we just, as a staff, we have a lot of year-end reporting to do. We have a lot of DESI reporting to do. For our finance staff, this is like reporting season. Reporting free cash, getting everything certified, going through DOR review. The next data point will probably be sometime in October, November, where we'll look at finalizing out the FY27 budget before the council has their tax rate session in December. I've noted too, but just for the rest of the committee, I've noted that one of the big goals for the council this year was looking at the tax rate and the exemption. So there's going to probably be 2 or 3 major tax rate workshops. And a little bit of a pleasant surprise, there are 3 high school interns in my office this summer, and they love tax rates. So we gave them a project on tax rates, and we're going to propose to the council that they present their findings as part of those workshops. It is unbelievable, and so everybody should really see how great our high school is and how great their parents are, because they've done an amazing job. So that's really the September, October, November kind of budgeting, at least to close out FY27. And maybe, Mr. Chairman, before I go on to FY28, maybe in case anybody have any questions about process or timing or some of the numbers, happy to answer them now.
You know me.
Yeah, that's why they put us next to each
I
other.
think so, it just streamlines it. This is a good thing. I'm wondering if you know what accounts for the increase on the miscellaneous line, 136,000, and it went all the way up. What we collected was 203.
Yeah.
What does miscellaneous entail?
Remember miscellaneous?
Yep.
Sorry.
No.
Just,
Sorry.
I just, yeah.
She's used to it.
I know.
Hi, Carrie Bertoni, CFO. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So miscellaneous, we have Medicare refunds. We have a refund for bills that were from prior years. So it's a whole smorgasbord of miscellaneous receipts that we receive, and that's where it goes. And actually, for reporting purposes to the DOR, I have to break it all out and explain each one.
Okay.
So that's why the number, that the budgeted amount that is in there, the estimate what we receive is very small, because we don't know what we're going to be receiving.
There are a lot of
Okay.
one-time things.
So you really just kind of projected a guesstimate
Yes.
of the 136, and then there's the actual, but the guesstimate is probably based on just like an aggregate of
Yes, it is.
average.
Average.
That comes in, great.
Correct.
Awesome, thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions? I have one question, which you might be getting to, you might get to later. Given the summer that we had, the World Cup and all these events, do you have a sense, and I get it's not reflected here, do you have a sense of how that worked out for Franklin?
We need to keep doing it. It worked out really well. I mean, obviously the World Cup was a one-time thing. I mean, can't do that, but you can't do too many World Cups. But we could try to invent our own World Cups or something else. I mean, I think if you look at the Finance Committee somewhere, I think we did the April 30th numbers, and then in here is really the end of May. And if you look at the numbers from April 30th to May 31st. You know, springtime, a lot of people eating out, you're starting all of the celebrations. Really the consumption taxes, if you will, really go up. And that's traditionally been the case, but I don't have any inclination. We won't have numbers for June until September 30th, because that's how the state does it. But I think if I look at the May numbers, I have to assume that June is very, very solid, if it doesn't even surpass what May did, which was quite substantial.
Okay, so, because my real question, and this is for the future, is gonna be, how did we do
Yeah.
versus our expectations?
Yeah.
And just getting a sense of that, I think, will be helpful for the.
I would not have projected an extra couple $100,000 in meals tax in 1 month.
Sure.
That's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, more martinis, Franklin. I mean, really. I mean, people delivered, and I think they filled our restaurants, and people come in from other towns, and you know that's a lot of money in 1 month. And so I think maybe the buzz of all the events and springtime, it just all kind of blended together. And so I would expect the June numbers to be very strong entering the new fiscal year.
I will shout out I know the World Cup events and a few of the other events I was able to attend this summer were fantastic and very well attended,
Yeah.
both by Franklinites and for people who are not from Franklin, which I really appreciated. I thought that was, my hope is that was a major win for
Yeah.
us, and hopefully we can figure out ways to keep things like that going on.
I think Restaurant Week, I'm sincerely saying this, I think Restaurant Week, kind of the promo leading for several weeks up to that, I think just started to get people excited about getting out of winter and spring and getting outside and going out to eat and doing, you know, fun things. So I think the Restaurant Week planning probably helped a lot just to get people excited about going out. And obviously people went out too, but I think the Restaurant Week was a real big success.
Any other questions on this past fiscal year?
Ken?
Have one, please.
Thank you. The reduction in the state aid, the 170,000, Jamie,
Yeah.
kind of net, as I remember the budget process, we were hoping for more, then they gave us some money, and
Yeah.
now they took 170 back. Are we still net plus what we thought we would be in the early part of the budget
Yeah,
process?
that's a great clarification. So the 170 loss is relative to what was voted on June 10th by the council. But still, we were overall from FY '26 to FY '27, Evan probably in a few minutes could get the number, but it was certainly probably almost $500,000 in local aid at least. So we still were in the positive significantly. And once the conference committee comes out with a budget in the legislature, it's really hard. You kind of like, if you're the rep and senator, you're kind of stuck with a yay or nay on what's there. So it's tough. You can't amend a conference committee report. So once it goes to conference, the House and the Senate, once they have that bill and it comes back out, it's like a yay or nay vote, and that's why it ends up being like, 198 to 2 or something, because most people have stuff in the budget that's important to their districts, so it's kind of that. I'm obviously disappointed that the Senate numbers didn't prevail. I think we all are. I think every city and town probably is, but also the legislature, when they come here in September, we'll learn about all the other competing priorities up there. But overall, from FY '26 to '27, we certainly made out quite well.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. 28?
So Evan has basically plotted out probably, in my opinion, probably the best 5-year and most accurate 5-year fiscal forecast we've had since before the pandemic. I think sometimes we all forget that the pandemic happened in 2020, and then finances in every city or town and every organization have been shuffling all over the place ever since. Numbers were all over there, assumptions were all over the place, but I think we've put in here, I think what's really important is, all the municipal related contractual obligations are costed out to the dollar. So for FY '28 and '29, those are reflected. Obviously, you can see my assumptions on the model, 2.5% levy. We left new growth stagnant across the board, so that's an issue I'm sure the board and others are going to need to talk about. We averaged together a 10-year state aid number at 1.3%, which we had typically been using 1.5% as our guideline in previous years, so it wasn't too far off. And of course, the 5% local receipts growth. We assumed the 2.5% for account 300, and Evan did a great job this year. And this is the first time we've ever done this, where we went through on over the last 5 years through expense reports of some of the smaller budgets. And you can see that reflected in the model. Some of them are 0%, some are 1, some are 4, some are 1.2. So what we tried to do is look at historical numbers and say, okay, what are departments really spending? And we tried to put a more accurate reflection. As everybody who's been through the budget knows, we usually just put in 2.5s down the line, but we didn't do that this year because we felt like we had better data sets to maybe use to come up with a more accurate number. And then in the memo, as I say, we assumed a 4% for facilities for expenses. I would say I did note that we did sign up for an electricity rate for 3 years. That's a hair lower than what we're paying now. So that probably is a wash, but at least we're not seeing a big spike in electricity costs for our schools and our facilities. That's great news. The big piece in here, and I mentioned this last year, was really the PEC agreement for the transition to the GIC. We've taken out the $435,000 that we had to pay in this past year's budget to help transition due to the Mass General Law 3132. We had to do it. So we see the metrics on healthcare going pretty well. I do want to make sure everybody's aware, on the healthcare numbers, we used what we're doing this year times 10%. By the time we get into budget season in April, we're going to now have a full year enrollment. We're going to see where people's plans are, human resources for both the schools and the town. are working with newly hired employees to make sure they're educated on what plan to choose, so they're getting the best plan for their family, to make sure they're saving money and we're saving money. So there's an opportunity, even by the time we get to April, that maybe even our operating healthcare numbers, you know, I mean, I'm knocking on wood here, but hopefully they're even a little lower than what they are right now, but we're just using the FY26 enrollment data, the actual enrollment data of what's actually is already enrolled, and just added 10% onto that. So those numbers may be a little inflated. It's probably a little liberal, but you know, we're trying to be cautious in case, you know, we see big healthcare spikes like we've seen. So that's the high level. I think the general high level assumptions that are in here, the 2.5% COLA across the board for municipal non-union. This does not assume any new debt service, other than we did put in here the model in case we ban the fire truck again, just for illustration. Because we don't know what free cash will totally look like, and we're not sure if we're going to be able to buy that outright. But even if you have to ban the fire truck for another year, that's a $32,000 hit. And ultimately, you're looking at a 1.07 million budget deficit as we go in today, and we're 8 months early. That's a lot better than last year. We're all headed in the right direction. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you know, if some of these assumptions, which are very realistic and very practical, come to fruition, you know, as I said last year, we should be able to use $1 million in free cash if we need to, without any more budget cuts, without overrides, without tax increases. I mean, that's up to you guys, but you know, I think overall, I think we're looking at a relatively favorable position. You know, I was asked, you know, just to add on really quickly, the council's been having discussions, I think, about, you know, 10-year infrastructure and capital plans. I just highlighted in here the district improvement plan for the schools. Brutus did do a great job putting together a 10-year window and vision for DPW costs. Some of those, most of that is not on operating budget, so it's kind of on the side, and we put in here the capital plan just for discussion purposes. I think the issue going into FY28 and beyond is really going to be likely more about capital and making sure that we can get the fleet, building repairs, and all that stuff that we generally need to do. I think that's going to be probably the bigger conversation point. You know, I don't think free cash is going to be over $4 million this year. I think it'll probably be 3.5, 3 to 4, somewhere in that range. So you're going to start to see the depletion of capital availability, and my guess is you're going to probably be in a very commensurate position to what we were this year, where we're going to have to get the special education vans, police and fire gear, some of the basic needs, and then you might have another $1 million or so to be able to spend on other technology or facility stuff. But as we move forward, I think that's going to be probably a bigger concern of mine than necessarily being able to patch up the operating budget. So these links in here were not necessarily there for discussion. I mean, they're not there to go through. We're not going to do the presentations or walk through them. I just put them there as reference so everybody could see the bigger picture going into the fall of where the cost drivers were. So that's really it, and obviously happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Just one question. I just noticed that the library stagnant for expenses.
Yeah.
Was there a rationale behind that?
I don't think was there a rationale? I don't think there was, other than they hit MAR. So usually what we do is you hit the, what was it, minimum
yep.
area requirement, whatever the MAR
Yep.
is that's required by statute. You know, we usually calculate that, and because the MAR was so close, usually we look at like another $25,000 or so over that MAR. So I think that's where, that might be where it is, unless Evan, you have any other thoughts.
Just curious, because
Yeah,
I noticed
no.
like everyone had a little bit of an increase for expenses over the course, but that one just seemed to stay a little stagnant.
Yep, so their 5-year average was kind of all over the place. Like one year they had a negative 16% decrease, another year was a 3% increase. So their 5-year average was really 0.32%. So I just rounded it off at 0.
Okay. So it wasn't based on anything beyond math?
Right,
Okay.
right,
Okay. Thanks.
yep.
It was a nice event yesterday, the other day.
It was great.
Yeah.
Great PR for sure.
I gotta slip. If no one else is going, I gotta slip. Do you want to go first?
Oh, did you?
It's fine if you want, I don't, have to go next.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to Jen's point, this fiscal forecast is early, so the library could still submit something asking for more money, right?
That's correct.
I mean, they could certainly, Felicia and her team could certainly come to Jamie and say, I'd like an additional person, I'd like an additional 2 people. That all gets discussed, obviously, during budget season. This is just
Expenses.
a preliminary, shot at looking at how things are going to be if everything, and basically, it looks like everything would be relatively flat,
It'd be relatively
right?
flat. Yep.
So,
Sorry, to that point, and this is just a point of procedure question, do the various team leads, do they get a chance to look at this summarized budget and just, maybe not bless it, but at least have a sense of where it is?
Yeah. No, I think to Ted's point, it's not like we ran this through them and they said, oh, we're gonna need this, that, or the other thing. I think to Jen's point, it's basically math. But I'm also sensitive to, we're using free cash to balance these budgets, and so, I think Council Coordinator Ledger is right. I mean, Felicia may come in and say, if I can have this, or the schools may come in and say we want 3%, or, any department could come in and say they need something, and they'll put it in their budget proposal for January. But I think realistically, the likelihood of all that happening or executing it is gonna be very challenging. Right.
So I agree with that.
But it's, at this point, it's just math.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think it's helpful to make sure that they're also kind of seeing where it ends up.
Sure.
Like, they can ask for whatever they want with some little stars, but ultimately, where we land, they should also be aware of where we're landing and what the projections are.
Correct. Yep.
and
Yeah, and can I just clarify my point? Sorry, Ted.
No, it's okay.
I was not looking at the salary piece, because I know that's a budgetary thing. I was looking at expenses, because I think it's unrealistic to think that expenses don't go up. So when I'm doing projections, I, automatically assume anywhere from a 3 to 5% increase from year to year, right? And that's from everything from groceries to bills to expenses. So that's why I was just looking at it thinking, is it really realistic to think that there's not going to be any movement in expenses, you know what I mean, for such a big organization in town? But I get it, it's just math. I know that they can add budget requests and whatnot. So I know it's just a projection, but I just was curious as to how we ended up flat, because, that concerns me a little, right? Because I don't think we ever see an account that doesn't fluctuate a little bit over the course of that many years.
The only quick add on to that is, these are bottom line budgets.
Yes.
So typically, expenses are going to come out of personnel may come out, especially for the library, is one that's really unique, because it's really an aggregate MAR number that the state requires you to have.
Right.
And I could put, the salary number may be a little high, because we have to pay that to tell the state that that's the report, but even if they don't spend it, it still qualifies under the law. So that one's just a little unique. You're right, expenses are not gonna be 0, but there's probably a buffer in there across the
On
board.
the
And when we look at the
salaries.
turnbacks, we'll see what the library turned back for FY '26, and that'll give you a gauge of where their window is. I don't have the number in front of me, but when we get the free cash certified, we'll know how much they turned back and what it is, so. Right?
Yep. So looking at the 5% for local receipts, did we base that off the 10-year average as well? That seems like it's a little generous.
That's typically, historically,
Yeah.
we increase by 5%.
Yeah.
Do we have any concerns based on tariff changes, inflationary pressures, any other concerns around the current environment that might make that a bit optimistic? And if we take an early hit on that, obviously 5% later on means a lot less.
Right, agreed, and we do, but we also have to be with, again, it's procedural, this is what we have to do as accountants. I cannot increase local receipt estimate more than what I received the prior year.
Right, I'm
Okay,
thinking, I'm
but
saying
I-
that I think it's too high.
You think 5% is too high?
Yes.
He's saying, is that too aggressive?
Well, I would just quickly say, we were 15.5% under, right? The projection, like 2.3, we budgeted 15.3 million last year, we came out with 17.6 or whatever. So we took in over 2 million more than what we projected, so I think a 5% number is more than reasonable.
Yeah, but as
Actually,
you
the
also
question was the
commented-
other direction, which is, why aren't we jacking it up 10%?
Because as you also commented, we don't have a World Cup every year.
You
So
know, the
there's a
World
lot
Cup,
of
but the
things that
World
kinda
Cup isn't
drive.
dominant in this production. Ambulance receipts
And,
are a big thing,
thank
building, you know, the driver is not gonna be one event. The driver is gonna be, it's a salad bowl of revenues that go into one pot that offset the cost of a lot of the municipal departments. And we just kept it at 5. We actually had a discussion last year about lowering the number, because we were nervous this year. We were really nervous that we weren't gonna hit benchmark at all. In fact, by the time I think we got to motor vehicle excise, we were like, I hope everybody pays it. And then, you know, like the springtime came in and obviously things went up across the board. You can see the numbers, so. You know, you're right, tariff changes, but you know, it's funny we worry about that stuff all the time. I've been doing it now, we've been doing it now for 7 years, worrying about global changes. And yet our revenues,
Never.
the local receipts this year was the largest amount we've ever increased. I also would give a shout out to the council for updating our fee schedule and staying on top of that with ambulance receipts. That's reflected in here too. You know, because we're charging more for ALS and BLS rates. And I think that does show the importance of making sure our fee schedules are modernized every year. And if there's something that's low, you know, we need to look at those things, so.
Yeah,
You
and
guys
I think-
did increase the fees.
Just to Paul's point, because I had circled that as well, it'd be worthwhile, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but here I think it might be good to see what it's been historically, you know, if you look kind of 3-year, 5-year, what has that
course.
trend been? What has that trend been? So that we have a sense of, you know, is 5 just, you know, is that too low, is that too high? Recognize that looking historically isn't always the right approach, but here I think it might be a good anchor for us.
We can do that. And this was a forecast, so typically we use a number to forecast for the next 5
Well,
years.
and that's when I
But-
think it's even more important. So like a 1 year out, great, 5%, if we don't hit it, like that impacts that year.
Yes.
But if you're looking for 5 years, the compounding effect can be pretty concerning. Like we're looking here, you know, looking all the way down at the, you know, the bottom numbers at, you know, at the end of those 5 years, there can be some very significant moves if we're suddenly taking in far less, as I said, especially early on. If we miss 1 year early on in this projection, 5% is coming off of a lower number, right?
Okay.
So that is my concern. We're 1 year, I don't
Certainly.
disagree. I think 5% makes sense. You have the most recent information, looking at the immediate impact, like the very next year. But when you're saying 5 years out,
Okay.
that compounding, I'd much rather we just be conservative with it.
Certainly, yep, we
So,
can do that.
sorry, I feel like I'm missing something here. We're over this year by like 15%. So if you do a backwards 5-year, like you've already covered 3 years just this year. So it's gonna support a number higher than 5% for sure.
But to the point also, they were very nervous just a few months ago. So I'd say instead of being nervous that we're not gonna hit it each year and project things and be like, oh, you know, what's gonna happen if we don't get there? Coming in with a lower number and then surprising to the upside where you then have either more free cash or we're not concerned and
Sure.
scrambling the last month of the year trying to find out where we're gonna cut is gonna be a much healthier way to approach this.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, hey, we had a great year, you know, it's kind of like spending the bonus before you get it. You're like, oh, last year my bonus was like, you
So
know,
I'm gonna get
10K, so I'm gonna do great this
Now we
year,
get the
and
jelly
then
or
something
the
happens
month
and you get
club, right?
But are you doing
Right, and
5%
that's exactly it.
on the 17, or are you doing 5%?
Didn't get the Christmas
on
vacation,
16?
sorry.
Like you're starting at 15 to do your 5%, right?
Thank
So
you, by
like-
the way.
I understand.
Like, again, it's a projection, right? It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah, no,
budget, it's not.
100%
So
agree.
you can project it any way you want, it just becomes a math exercise at that point. But we've already surplused it by 2 million this year, like alone, which again is like, it's like 17% or something like that in 1 year that we're over. So we don't even catch up to this year's current with a 5% increase.
Right.
And this year's current, as we just discussed, doesn't include the World Cup. So the likelihood that the 5% projection this year is another undershot because you have a good June starting you off, it seems also super likely. So, I mean, like, can we rerun the projection? Sure, definitely can run it at 2%, 4%, 5%, whatever we want. But like, it's an odd one I think that we're keying in on because it's just a projection and you can pick any number you want.
Right. That's why I'm saying it's worthwhile to have that anchor.
Yeah.
Right. Just because people can look at it, it's like, okay, we're going 5%, but really when you look at the last 3 years, it's really like 13%.
Yeah.
You know, so there's no question there.
And I think that's the
that-
same-
That resolves the
It's the same
conservatism
answer
question.
that we got before, right? Is like, the library expenses didn't go up a ton, but the reason is because Evan looked at 5 years back, and over the course of 5 years,
Okay.
the answer was roughly zero, so he stated zero.
And that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
It's like a math exercise. This is all just all discussion about a projection math exercise. Has nothing to do with the budget for next year, other
No.
than it's people's ideas on what it could look like
Yeah.
hypothetically with math.
Just giving us a place to start.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an appendix each year in the operating budget, but we'll just do the aggregate percentages over 20 years. Is that, like, we'll look back local receipts, just the aggregate. We do put an appendix in the budget with all of, it goes back over a decade.
I mean,
But-
if we're saying, hey, this is the 20-year
Well,
average, I don't
we'll
know
look
if
at the
that's-
20 years.
Like, the world is different, right?
Yep.
So, you know, it might make sense to look at 20, but I'd love to see 3 and 5 because it's just.
You got it.
That's all it is.
You got it. Yep.
I mean, 3 might make even more sense just because then you're kind of blotting out COVID times
Right.
as
Right.
irregular.
Yeah, that's
fair.
true.
Oh, except because I'm thinking about this on a rolling basis, we want to be doing it every year, so.
Sure.
We have the history, we also have last 3 years, last 5 years, and that helps with our projections, which are just that, they're just numbers, we're guesses.
I know we're about to move to the 5-year. Paul,
Yeah.
fundamentally, I agree with you. I did my own, like, just projecting in Excel, and you could play with all the different numbers. And mine was way more bleak than this, so I vote for Jamie's to be the. We're picking our favorite projection, or Evan's like, this one's great, let's do this one. But.
Mr.
like,
Chairman, can
you
I
know,
ask a question?
There's a lot of stuff that
Yes,
you kind of.
Just a clarifying question. Assuming that we go on, this number, the 1.70977 as a deficit number to just work from, right? Because it's just a projection. As I understand it, it's the charge of this 3-group board to try to figure out a way to bring that number down so that we don't have to dip into significant amounts of free cash again, so that we actually have it for the capital program. Am I correct? In that that's basically our charge as a group?
When we look at the draft goals, that's where our charge will be, that's where we're gonna end up. I'm not
Okay.
saying what, the fourth item, the next item on our agenda is to review the draft committee goals. And and I can't recall if that, I know your specific language isn't in there, what you just said, but that is a component of it. So we'll decide that after we're kind of done with this conversation. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
I think that's important for everybody
I
to
don't
be on the
disagree.
same page so we have some purpose, right? So,
Ultimately,
yeah.
what we want to do is minimize our cash shortfall.
Right, because right now, that 1.70977 assumes that we haven't used anything, right? We're gonna have to use free cash to bring that balance,
balance
just
that
like we
zero.
had to do this year, so, okay.
And we'd love to avoid that, so
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, but
But-
we
but
we
we'll-
know from budget discussions that
But
that may
before
not
we
be
even get into
realistic,
that,
yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to keep that for when we
Okay.
talk about goals and how we accomplish them. That's
Okay.
the next part of this.
Great, thank you.
So then another point, and just kind of looking through a bunch of the different lines we had, like not line 192, 210, 220, 422, and 610, we always have the salaries and the expenses broken out. I think those two exist in very different realms, especially for, some of the different departments. Their expenses go up significantly, and I think you reflect that accurately here. But one of the challenges that I see is that for the salary line, it just says union fixed. And I think if we're gonna be generating and trying to look at everything in front of us, having that actual percentage there is gonna be really helpful. And then also breaking out line 300 in the same way, where it's salaries and expenses. Because I think it also reminds folks that for the schools, a lot of the drivers, the salary, we've actually done a great job. The union was very supportive. Actually, all the unions over the past year and a half. But our expenses keep on going up far faster than that 2.5%. So looking at just setting the overall, line 300 at 2.5 kind of eliminates a lot of that conversation and that apples to apples comparison. So if we're able to just look at all of them the same way, I think it's really gonna help making sure that people understand.
What's happening?
Well, that the driver, again, for us, the drivers are mandated by the state. All of our biggest expenses are mandated by the state. So there's gonna be a lot of complications there, and I think it allows us to capture it in that expense line.
So is the Are you guys gonna be able to produce a salaries line item and an expense line item? I
Yes.
mean, I don't see why you couldn't, but I
Yeah,
just
no,
wanna
I-
make sure.
We provide that to the school committee in our budget
You wanna-
process, but we can certainly provide those numbers if that's the will of the.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
That'd be,
That,
yeah,
that,
fantastic.
that I think would provide some clarity, that would be.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know if I can
Absolutely.
add to that, ask, but Paul, is it possible, I think you just mentioned some of it is like state mandated. Is it possible to break those expenses out into like state mandated expenses versus not state mandated? I don't, yeah.
No, so it's definitely possible. I'm mostly thinking about we are a touch short-staffed at the moment for all the exciting reasons. We can get it, and the school committee can follow up with that and then work to provide that.
And maybe
So-
not even for this, just for the next like
Yeah, so we,
budget cycle. I
for
feel like
down
that'd be
the road.
super helpful.
we did that for the last budget cycle, and basically looked at what the driving forces are, where the actual restrictions, limitations are, so we can identify that. Projection is going to be extremely challenging.
Yeah.
Because, and I just want to kind of go all the way there and explain, the expenses that we have are not bound by all the other restrictions that we have.
Right.
So let's say, you know, any kind of outplacement work, they can raise the costs according to the state, you know, with basically an okay from them. So they could be up, you know, we could have expenses up 5%, 6%, and year to year it changes a lot. So from the projection side, we're gonna have trouble,
Yeah.
but we can definitely break it out this year, and if we want to extrapolate from there, just kind of looking back the past few, we can do it.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because I think that would help give, it's a big line item, right? It'd help
Mhm.
give some visibility into like what portion of the line item is even within the town's control in any way, shape, or form, like town, school, all being
Less
town
of
in
it
that
than you
statement. Right, but like, yeah, if it's like
Yep.
70% of that is just straight fixed, nothing we can do, it makes the discussion totally different, and I think sometimes there is this like, the budget is split 50-50 town and schools, give or take.
Mhm.
Well, that lens is actually like, well, no, it's not. It's split 50 town, 20 schools, 30 totally fixed by the state, no control whatsoever, like, don't even look here because it makes you can't do anything. So if you try to
30 this
split,
year, 32 next year, 34 the year after.
Yeah.
Right,
If you look at it as an overall percentage of our budget, the fixed expenses, so our salaries obviously are a large driver, but that is something we control, and again,
Sure.
good relationships with the FEA, they've been great partners there. But that fraction has been shrinking, and actually, we can definitely pull up, because we did look at that as part of our conversation this past year, where you think about, I think, our 5 main items that are fixed, or that we have no control over, it's like buses, well, it's external.
right,
What they tell us the price is, you know, we obviously do our due diligence and do our best, but those costs, any of the, you know, again, outplacement work, a lot of the extra supports that we have, that is the part of the pie that's been growing, while the overall percentage that we are to the town has actually been decreasing over the past 10 years. So it's been a very challenging kind of conversation in both directions.
gotcha. Yeah, no, that's helpful context, and certainly like, hopefully we're not in a cuts discussion, but I think it's helpful for that discussion as well, of like, you can't look at the whole pie to make cuts because some of it is fixed. Like, you know, similar to some of their salaries that are on here for different departments and things where it's union negotiated and it's already fixed for the next few years, but they're just untouchable pieces, and I think it's helpful to see that.
So just for line 300, yes, we can, it sounds like we can do salaries and expenses and get that breakout. I was gonna ask about 390 and 395, but I guess they're relatively small, but it'd be great if we had that too.
Tri-County, Norfolk Aggie, no, I cannot.
You don't have that, okay.
That's an assessment.
Those are also delayed a year. So actually, I do believe the Tri-County number will go down a little. We just need a letter from the state basically saying, here's your enrollment. Because last year it went up, I think, 7 students. I think this year they projected 7 less because they're the whole delayed year cycle on the assessment.
Okay.
Then I think the charter school's been somewhat, that's fluctuated a good bit.
That fluctuates.
I feel like that's always
Absolutely.
come in a little bit higher than we project. That was actually surprising to me, like when I was looking at the school assessments, I was like, all right, 4.05 for all of them, like, yeah, it's like, I feel like, again, the charter, and this is just one of those, we're looking at the historical data, I think projects something.
Correct.
But just recognizing, again, as soon as we go out that far, being conservative is only gonna benefit us, because if we're looking at a 6 million budget deficit in 5 years, and really it's 8, I'd really like to know if we're gonna have those discussions now and start trying to plan, because that's a significant difference, versus if, hey, we're only gonna be down by 5. Not that suddenly everything's rosy, we can fix it, but it's just a very different type of discussion. So I think anywhere that we can be conservative, you know, with some of the assessments, especially charter school just going a bit higher, local receipts going a bit lower. Each year, I think to Ken's point, if we're doing these kind of rolling assumptions, we can see what our accuracy has been. We have that look back capability. And if we've realized that, hey, we've always been far too conservative, great, then we can sit down and discuss it. But I think in these windows, we have a lot of people watching, and they're gonna point to these and say, oh, but you guys said we were gonna be fine. And then when we get to the end of the year, it's either we're in really good shape, which fine, I'm not ever gonna complain about that, or we get to the end of the year, like you said, Jamie, like that stress of how are we gonna make this work over the next like 3 months? It worked, wonderful, like fantastic. But if we can go in and say, all right, coming into the end of the year, we're hitting right, you know, all our numbers are fine or above. That's gonna be a much easier discussion and update for the community than start thinking about where we're gonna cut, start thinking about what's gonna happen, and then we get to the end, it's like, oh, never mind. Right, that kind of emotional roller coaster is one of the things I'm trying to avoid.
The emotional roller coaster in that time window that you just spoke to, Paul, is gonna be the Foundation Budget Commission at the state level. They're gonna reform Chapter 70 by the end of this financial forecast that's right here. They are going to reform Chapter 70 unquestionably. Been saying this for a long time. I know sometimes I got eye rolls at times in the past, but as Mr. Dutch knows, every 10 or 12 years this is what they do because the formula starts getting out of whack for other communities. And the one thing they agreed to this year is an overwhelming amount of lawmakers feel like the formula is broken. So even, I agree with all that you said, Paul, in terms of historical numbers, we have to be somewhat logical and conservative, but I think we need everybody's support to make sure that our constituencies know, even with this model out there, the unquestionable biggest factor in here is going to be the Foundation Budget Commission and whether the legislature changes the Chapter 70 formula. Because that changes these numbers like more substantially than probably anything else. So I think, you know, we'll wait for Rep. Roy and Senator Roush to give us some more clues, but I think that that's really within the framework of this model, because you referenced the 6 million in a few years, you can't talk enough about this Foundation Budget Commission, because that's the biggest deal, for sure.
I think, thanks. To that point too, and this is, I was gonna say this before, but just with regard to expenses that are coming, you know, that the schools need, that are from the municipal side that do get to utilize the Chapter 78, is it worth just to be more clear on what departments need the support? And because we don't have that broken down, and I know it's reported like in the rear, it's reported like each September of the year before, but it could be a trend we could follow and see, especially with the consolidations and expenses with the DPW and things like that, just to keep an eye on, because I get a lot of questions about that, like everything we've been dealing with in the past couple of years with like the little add-ons, like with the mice problem and things. It's like people are like, you know, should we get cats? Is this wasting teacher money? Like, how's this going to work? So I think it could be for that first page where we have the 5-year, you know, the revenue and control sheet. It would be helpful, sort of like what we have for our charter school payouts and things like that.
Sorry, I think I'm not sure I'm following your recommendation, just, you're keeping track of.
You know what I'm saying, Jamie, right?
Are
Like
you
the part
talking
that we
about
have to
the
report.
expenses that are school-related expenses that get calculated in the net school spending?
Yeah, so that when we know, like, oh, because like there's been narratives before where it's like, oh, Chapter 70 went up X amount, and it's like, well, that doesn't go right to our teaching staff. That doesn't go to our salaries. It goes to like a lot of things that.
No, it
schools-
does. I mean, the entire
Like I
amount
said-
of Chapter 70 goes to the account 300. I mean, so we don't, like, the town doesn't take any, like, Chapter 70 money to pay for lawn mowing, you know what I
Right,
mean?
but
Like,
we report,
but we report it because it's required by law and they are school-related expenses.
right.
We
that's kind
can,
of
we
what
can
I'm-
probably go back and look at net school spending. Like, if you want a 3 to 5 year window, kind of like the previous request on local receipts, we could probably do a 3 or 5 year window. Evan could probably produce some of that, working with the schools, and just look at the last 5 years and say, where have those costs gone? I mean, we could do
It's-
that. We could look at the 5 net school spending reports of the last 5 years. I thought that's what you were.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I think what she's
that's
referring
kind
to
of
is
what
like
I'm saying.
the local aid number shifted this year,
Uh-huh.
right? So as we're going through the budget process, we all came in projecting at a certain level. The schools had their number that was set, and then the local aid came in higher, and that didn't adjust the school budget at all.
Right.
So that's where this narrative, I think, is coming from, where that money did dissolve kind of into the rest of the town, because local aid itself is not covering the school budget. no matter what, right? We had $72 million. Local aid is not nearly enough to cover that. But when people saw that adjustment in what was being sent in local aid, and they didn't see a commensurate increase in the school budget, that's where questions like this come about, is why didn't the schools see an increase in a few $100,000?
Like, we understand on school committee, but I think that for the sake of the community and transparency and maybe this group, it's helpful. I mean, if it's not an abundance of work, because I think we report it anyway, so it could just be plugged in. Yeah.
I mean, we could put together a different model. I mean, I just kind of need clarity on what we're asking for. I mean, and also, it's clause, local aid went up significantly in the Senate budget because of AGA. So it's not Chapter 70. And I've said this many times before. Everybody puts out the press release. This is the highest per pupil cost we've ever done in state history. And everyone, feels good, which it's just great. But, then you have, it's just a little bit more. I think part of this is about educating the residents about how the formula works, which I know is painfully boring. We had Desi in here earlier this year, and I get it sometimes doesn't jive with the really overwhelmingly positive press releases that are put out. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes, because the press releases say one thing, but the way it gets integrated in here. With what Paul said, I understand the optics of like, hey, there was all this extra money. Why didn't the school see a corresponding number? And I think that's something we have to try to work with people for them to understand that. So I definitely agree with you on that. So, when I look at it, and I've said this before, it's like, when I look at this, it's in the aggregate, right? Because I'm looking at the entire community, including the school department. So we just plug in numbers that we get from the cherry sheets. We don't cut up silos, and I respect that people do, and I understand why, but I just put in the numbers and show the aggregate and try to pay all the bills to the best ability that I can. But we'll try to put together some numbers the last 3 or 5 years and just try to look at how those have historically worked.
Yeah, I think with the commission, especially working on this for schools, it's going to be scrutinized, especially if there's a deficit on the horizon, which we know there is. So it's worth.
I did just want to take a quick second as a follow-on. So Ryan, you had asked about, we're kind of breaking these things out and what they could look like. Just as a reference point, so for salaries for schools this past year, we're up 1.88%. Our expenses were up 5.75%. And those are all pretty well set. And actually after this, if you want, I can go over, we have it broken down between like our top items, that you can actually see their growth and how they've started squeezing out the salary side of things. It's like our salary as part of our budget used to be 78%. Now it's down to below 76%, just over the past couple of years. But I can break out the other items as well and showing you exactly which ones are
Even if we just broke the
mandated.
expenses in half to say, hey, or not half, but like, the mandated ones maybe went up 10%, and the unmandated ones only went down because we had to cut, right? Who knows, right? But like the mandated ones versus the unmandated, sort of discretionary might tell an even more stark.
It does, yeah.
Story.
I can go over it
Yeah.
instead of just rattling off lots of numbers, but yeah, we have that broken out.
To me, that's where it would be helpful to see that in our, yes, we have a 5-year forecast, this is what we're projecting. Here's the historical context, that's all it does.
Especially things like special ed, like we had 17 kids move into our district who
Yeah,
needed
but
things like.
I don't know that you'd break out special ed
No,
necessarily.
I just mean, it's
but
like,
yeah,
it's,
a
as far as
mandate,
mandated, it's like, it does throw a curveball into the budget process very late in the summer, and it gets really challenging for the administration and staff.
Any other thoughts on the forecast?
So,
Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Jamie, we've talked about this as part of the economic development work from that subcommittee too. New growth, I see that's pretty stable through fiscal '28, but you keep that fairly conservative through the 5-year forecast as well. We've had lots of discussion on how to anticipate new properties coming online, new development, all those kinds of things. And I think we added, or there's some expectation that, some of those revenues will go up just by the assessor's office and inspection process and the deputy TA. If we're going to take another look at this, is there ways to kind of look at and come up with some realistic projection on new growth? Because I'd expect those numbers are going to go up with all the big
Yeah.
projects that are underway, right?
New growth, I think with the chart that we discussed at the last meeting with, what projects were in the queue, just keep in mind, everybody, like, I'll just say it, Depot Plaza, right? You're gonna go through an 8-month, well.
5 years out?
Yeah,
Like,
right,
not
like,
even
I
in
just,
this budget.
I mean, if something goes through the permitting
No
process
chance.
today, you gotta almost forget about it a little bit, there may be a couple of examples, like Gorelick is finally ready to come look at some of their parcels because of ending court cases, and Dairy Farmers of America, I should say. That might be something on a rezone that maybe if they go into development quickly because they've got the resources and they've got the energy, maybe that's something that hits in year 4 or 5 of this. Maybe Depot Plaza, if it goes flying through in 6 months and the developer really puts a shovel in the ground right away, you could calculate out. But I think what you got from that list, Councilor Malloy, that we did at EDC, that list is really your list that you could think of as some sort of project. I just want to say that each year new growth goes to 0. So a lot of those projects that are on that list, or other home renovations if interest rates get better, if the home improvement market picks up, you might be able to calculate, but you're kind of go to 0, and then those projects that are on that list basically fill up the 876,000 a year. We had a discussion that the planning board is extraordinarily dry right now. There's virtually nothing before them. And I think this is a conversation maybe for this committee too, that may be able to help the council as well, is what's our vision of development in Franklin? I mean, development is politically very unpopular, but it's a necessary reality. So I think that's a tough conversation to have with the community when they're very disappointed or upset in certain projects. But I think that list, that's why I kind of kept it even throughout. I think a big marker will be whether or not the assessors come back this fall. We assumed 800 whatever thousand was in the FY27 budget. Maybe they come back this year and they say, hey, we got 1.1 million in new growth in November. They could come back with a higher number than what we estimated. I do think that the focus should be on the projects that are on that list, and maybe some of the ones that, there's nothing we can do about, developers that are delaying building their projects because of cost increases. There's some smaller subdivisions out there where I do know the cost to build them. People don't feel like they're gonna get their money back. They're waiting, they've got their permits, but they're waiting for the cost side to go down so they can make a greater margin. You've got several lawsuits on some of the projects too. So I think Summer Street, for example, stuff like that, those may go on for years still. There's not a tremendous amount of opportunity, and that's why it's kind of flatlined. And that's a very conservative way a lot of communities, and what we've traditionally done in the past, is just kind of flatline it for the model, because it's to project out may grow those deficits more, or may give a fallacy that there is no deficit, and then that's harder to reconcile. Well, 2 years ago you said we were going to see a big spike in new growth, and we weren't going to have a deficit, and now we don't have that money, and now we have a problem. So it's as you can imagine, it's so tricky.
No, I know, we kind of struggle to sort through it, recognizing that there is some value there at some point, especially with the projects that are approved and underway.
Yep.
As few as they are, right? But
And the
potential-
building permit issue will be captured in local receipts. So I think you're seeing, once Gus gets that extra inspector and the admin gets hired, in the fall for the assessor's office, if we do get some of those permits turning quicker, you'll see that in local receipts. So there may be an argument to be made going into FY28. Maybe we put local receipts up to 7% or 6%, and that cuts the deficit down, because you're doing what you should do with fees. We are generating more fees through building permits and so forth. That's where you're going to see the revenue, not in new growth, but from those positions, you're going to see most of the revenue through local receipts, which is still revenue into the whole pie, right? We'll
I
take
get it, you got to look at it big picture about,
Yeah.
the elements of how we want to look at the costs and, some potential new growth in there too.
Correct.
So I think that's important.
So, just a comment, like, you sparked a thought. I read it on Facebook and ignored it because I didn't have the energy to, I think I hit my comment limit at that point. but there was a comment about how it's the tax levy can go up 2.5% plus new growth, and it was ambiguous and just want to like state for clarity. That's the amount goes up, but it's not like additive to people who already own homes. It was listed as if it was going to like raise your taxes go up 2.5% plus new growth is for the new growth.
Right.
So just it's a good conversation about new growth, but new growth like it helps our overall. I think then it trickles down though into the rest of the budget. Right? Costs go up on everything else. There's more kids that join the schools. There's more, like there's pieces of that get neutralized in time. Probably not right away, but over time, like it kind of has a balancing effect. I think it's kind of important for people to realize that. An unrelated comment, but Paul kind of segueing off something you said before. Like certainly this is a projection at where we might be negative. If we wanted to get ahead of that, I think your kind of math lesson for us there is important, right? Like you don't solve a $6 million problem in 5 years when you arrive at it. Like, and it doesn't matter if it's 6 million or 8 million or 14 million or 2 million. Like the best way to solve it is going to be by trying to do 1/8 of that problem now and build on it every year. So like, I don't know if this is the time in this conversation, but how do we sort of pivot towards that of like, this gives us a framework within which to think, but in reality, that's kind of it. Like we could tweak all the numbers and it could be 7, it could be 8, it could be 4, but like, what do we want to do to try to increase the income by 200K this year so that next year it'll be 300, so that the year after, short of having a second World Cup, like where do we?
You're saying short of having, we should just have a second World Cup. No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Franklin World Cup,
Franklin World Cup.
or the Metacomet.
Or kickball tournaments or whatever.
Well, like I do
So
wonder
that actually
on
opens
that
up-
though,
that-
like
that's
on the
next
World Cup. Yeah, like I don't know if we have like an
Franklin
after action
kickball.
type thing. And I know you can't have a second World Cup, like I kind of joke, but like couldn't you have similar events, like a watch party? And I know we got funding to do some of that. Like I know some of the
All of it
cost
was
was
grant.
free,
All of it was free.
but like if it weren't,
Yeah.
would we have made money on that on that event?
I mean, in the aggregate, probably a little. I mean, because in the month, and I would say just the month of June, right? I mean, for
Yeah.
that event alone, I truly don't believe we would have made money.
Okay.
Because the
Yeah.
cost of
Like the big screen TV and all the chairs and all the setup, and
cops,
closing the streets.
details, closing the
Okay.
streets, right? The staff cost, when you really start going down into it, if you wanted to really get into it, you know, the cost of Corey's salary, the cost of Ryan's salary, you know, if you were really mathing it out, you'd be saying 1/12 of their benefits because they spent an entire month planning all that out, right? I mean, they're doing other work, but I'm just methodology-wise, when you add it up, if you're looking at it from almost a corporate perspective, I don't think the meals and hotel tax revenues, it could have been a wash, you know, but I don't think we would have said, oh, there's a bonanza there. And boy, you know, we clearly could have made a 6-digit number. To your point, boy, if we did it this year and we knew we made 100 grand and we double our efforts, next year we can make 200 or 300.
Do two of them.
Well, geez, this is a thing we should keep going, right? The amount of grant money we got from the state to do this in the feds was pretty significant. And a lot of the costs were even off, you know, were even off budget because the state just paid for X, Y, and Z. So, I mean, the World Cup alone, I do think the restaurant week, and I do think the cultural aspect of getting people out and moving and consuming, you know, I think that is where the money is probably more, because the marketing for the restaurant week is very easy. It's a very low lift. Now that they've been through 1 year, it's going to be less staff time next year, but the yield on that is actually quite significant. You know, so I think that's the type of stuff I think that would continue to make a difference. And I would I mean, the staff they've already announced the dates for Restaurant Week next year.
Sure.
You know, so they're already excited about it. I mean, the planning of it is almost already done. You just got to wait for the dates, go through winter, wait for
Sure.
dates for the fun stuff.
But I mean, that's like one thing. I guess like, again, like the World Cup is just like the easy one to refer to, but like, is it a Super Bowl watch that like, you know, we go to the high school and everybody's in the gymnasium, you want to bring your little kids and they can run around because like watching the Super Bowl with your kids at home isn't as fun because they're done at halftime and want to be up in your space, right? Like who knows? And then like, do local stores want to sell stuff there or like sell food or whatever it is? Like, are there things
Especially
like
if the
that?
Patriots are in the playoffs or something like that.
Yeah, like just are there events we could capitalize on, I guess is the.
I will say, not to interrupt, but just a side note, this Horseman Legacy Subcommittee that we're creating to make the Horseman campus is kind of like a 2-year project, and it's all gonna be based on grants and things like that. It doesn't touch our budget. But, you know, Jeff was interested, we initially had talked, because I'm on like the community outreach, about trying to make the birthday, which is May 4th, it's kind of like a day, a thing where like, you know how they have the people dress up in like old time garb and have like the muskets and like Concord Lexington, and people like flock to that town and they go to like the taverns, and it's kind of like a theme, so I'm just to add to the list of
Give
events.
Disney a call, and see if.
Alan Earl's the Historical Commission, like this group would
Historical
be
outfits and lightsabers,
really
there we go.
into
Yeah.
like creating something like this for the future, and I think it would serve us to continue to get it on the map. So,
Yeah, no, I
just
mean, I think
events like that,
that's
like
the
this is
stuff.
one that like, I think could take off a little if we got the rest of the community, you know,
Sorry.
on board.
Ryan, to your earlier point about, you know, what should we be doing, that's actually where I want us to go next, as we review the goals. So unless there are other questions on the 27, 28 budget or 5-year forecast, why don't we shift gears, you know, to review the goals, let's make sure we agree on what we're laying out, and then let's talk about how we actually freaking do those.
Yep.
So I'll read through them. Let's talk, you know, and we'll go one by one. Let's outline what does it mean. Let's talk about, you know, how we're actually gonna, what does it mean? Let's make sure we're on the same page, and then how do we actually begin to enact it? The first one is educating the public on what is local government, what services are provided, and why. Folks generally agree with that. Is that too broad? Is it not broad enough?
I think it's outside of our scope, because our job is to focus on the budget. Doing it kind of in reverse is if we're explaining how the budget impacts those things, it makes sense. But having an outright goal to educate the public on what local government is, I think can be extremely broad, and it bogs us down with things that aren't necessarily related.
I think what might be helpful, though, is there does have to be an educational piece here. And I think that what might be helpful for people is a broader brush look at the buckets of money, where money comes in, where money goes. I think there's a big lack of understanding, because I had my own lack of understanding before I started digging more deeply into this. When I pay my, water bill, and it goes to the water, it doesn't just come to the town and it goes to this other account that can only be used for these things. We have the buckets right here, they're listed on this sheet, and I think if we gave, I don't know what the forum would look like, but if there was a way to give people a bigger broad brush stroke of this, unbelievable.
Sorry,
There you go.
I'll jump in. So instead of local
Yeah, no,
government,
you're right,
educate the
John. You're
public on on our financial structure, just,
Right,
where-
like from this, there's, these things where the money comes in, and but these, we can't, this isn't just free money to put anywhere else. It has to be a separate thing. Understanding what the things that go out that are fixed, like the debt exclusions. All these things, these buckets that we have here, if they were presented in a less financial way,
So,
in a more, like even in like a fun little
packet.
thing that
Graphic.
says
So-
like, here's this
An
bucket,
infographic.
here's a little cute
So,
bucket, and
for
in this
example-
bucket
Yeah,
pours these things.
that's valid.
But it can't come out here, like there's ways that I think we could, I don't wanna say dumb this down, it's been dumbed down for me, I dumbed it down for myself. But for lack of a better word, not dumbing it down, but diluting it some from the fiscal look.
so to that end, in my mind, I'm picturing on our website somewhere, we've got, people pay taxes, here's the bubble that represents said taxes, and here are the various things that they go to pay. So people have a better sense of that.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
I
That's
think a
not dumbed
visual-
down, but a visual, a graphic that shows the flow.
Of everything.
But I think going further to exactly that point is instead of creating one bubble, it's you're paying multiple independent bubbles
Yes.
that never touch.
Yes.
And yet we talk about them all on the same piece of paper. But that, again, that
It
same
may start out
idea.
as one big bubble, because, hey, this is our entire budget, and then this is the, whatever, 140 million of town of Franklin, and then that breaks into X, to this and this, and then kind of breaks down.
At the risk of solutioning here, like, I think we're agreeing on the goal, though,
That's-
to educate, but we're
Right.
changing, I think, Paul, to your point, like, from local government to local government finance.
Yep.
Financial structure.
Is that
Yeah.
financial
Big deal.
structure? Is that, do people generally agree with that language? So educate the public on local government financial structure, services provided and why.
Sure, is that something that's gonna be our purview? Like, are we looking at little subcommittees? Are we gonna try to, like, do we have a PR marketing
We
person?
can't
What is the
subcommittee
latest with
further.
the budget? I know, I'm like saying, I'm like kidding. Who can we delegate this to be a bit of a drip campaign to circle in, and maybe they could be, you know, the content creators?
Jamie's throwing up his phone.
Liz, and when,
Exactly what I was gonna say.
when the deputy town administrator comes on board in the next month, it's a phenomenal project for them to kick off.
For somebody who's just getting.
And what I'm visualizing is the financial structure is really a script of a 2 to 3 minute, script that's like a CapCut content creator system that's basically got a graphic that's like, your whole budget in Franklin is 150 million, and where does that money come from? And then it's like local aid from the state is 1/3 of that, and here you pay all your fees, and you can do something very creative, I think, to get across a 2-minute clip of explaining it of
Can
150
we
million
please knock
budget.
that out?
Even like a
You
tutorial.
can do little
Could you
enterprise
do a
ones.
video
I
type of
want to
thing?
see the math
Or have
movies
high
that we
schoolers
do
do
from
it.
the middle schoolers,
Yeah.
the middle school teachers, if anyone hasn't seen that.
I
This is
would
like
too.
Schoolhouse Rock.
Schoolhouse
Exactly.
Rock, that's
I'm just a
exactly. I'm just a
bill.
How a bill
Shannon,
becomes
are
a
you
law.
volunteering to do the
Exactly.
song? Because
I'm
that would be
just a budget.
But he was
Stand
just
there
a
and
bill, so.
We could probably get,
It was just a
At the
bill.
schools,
This
poor
is
guy
a
was-
bill.
But as a goal, like, I
'Cause
think
that's
we
what
still
they
need
do,
to
it's
come
just
back
sit on
from-
cap.
That is one thing that goal could
That little
do.
guy,
right.
totally right.
Sorry, Ted, did you have something?
No, I
Sit
was
up there and do something.
simply gonna echo the communications department and deputy TA comment, but I also think instead of it being this large, broad thing, that it would probably be helpful to the public if it was maybe once a month we focused on something and make it easy, right? Like, this month, we're gonna focus on the police budget, and here's how that looks, and here's where money comes from, and here's what they do, and maybe the next month is schools, and the next month is DPW, but I think if we do this too broad, and people are gonna get sort of like totally confused and figure like, it's not very helpful, but those little infographics with a few links, and maybe the department head, doing something on video, talking about it, making it very friendly. I mean, I could see those becoming easy discussions at the senior center. I could see them becoming fairly easy for the town communications department to put that out on Facebook, right? Like, it's just a once a month thing, you know when to expect it, and here's what it is. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. I don't want to use the words dumb it down, but it's nice to just be like simple, right?
the one-
And
I
just,
think I'm kind of a yes and, but I know George had a thought.
yeah.
Sounds good. How do you get it up?
Right.
Well, and that's,
I mean, you on our website,
yeah.
and everything you want to know about anything is there,
Very true.
everywhere. Who reads it?
So that's the thing, is where do people watch? They
It's
watch town
too
council
complex.
more than
Hey,
anything.
That's
I go to a
wrong.
meeting at the senior center on Thursday mornings. Jamie's been a guest.
Mhm.
This morning, they wanted, it was, what are we gonna do? But I got on a tangent, as I often do. And I went through the police department, how they rearranged the schedules, recovered the extra 8 hours so we could do additional training, et cetera, et cetera. Then I went to the fire department. They reorganized, put in the battalion chiefs, but stopped paying stipends, made it much more efficient even. And at the same time gave younger people there 4 more jobs farther up. And then I have a neighbor whose son is a firefighter in Ashland. He doesn't want to come here because we have too many calls, I might add. But that's one thing he mentioned, the progression up the pole. Brutus, how many innovations over the years has Brutus had? Hot and placed on the roads, that kind of stuff. Yeah, you had one little, but we figured that out. Who did I miss?
Senior center.
Four of
Forgot the
them.
senior center.
Schools, senior center.
The schools, the reorganization of the schools, it went magnificently. That's why the salary budget probably went down a little. But we can't get it out. The room had 7 people in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll just jump in. I do think the social media aspect is unfortunately where people are at. I do agree with Ted. We can do a dozen vignettes or so on each major department. I do like the idea. I do think the 2-minute omnibus comprehensive is still important. I think if I look at the 11, 12 people here or whatever, I see people that have networks, friends, some social media,
We
some.
have friends. That's why we're here, James.
Like we, collectively, some of us have friends, not all of us.
That's probably more the precursor.
Nobody sits on an island by himself more than me, so don't talk about friends. You got a lot more than I do. But each of you have different demographics and people you communicate with, and I think this is a communications subcommittee for the town and schools to figure out how do you get out the message in an era of white noise. You guys have to go out and tell people they need to care. You know, the senior center had a rough time because their nurse got cut and everybody freaked out, and we found a creative way to get it back because there was a resignation. But it's like lost information at this point. You know, I mean, there's nobody really paying attention. Everyone's just happy again. So I think getting attention spans is a different issue, and it is very hard. But I think the idea we'll have the staff capacity to do some of these. And I think we have to start trying something and doing, Ted, you said this actually at the budget hearing, like, I've been here 4 or 5 years now, and what happened in the past just didn't work, so I'm gonna start doing different
Try
things.
something different.
And I think these are things where we have to try them and just give them a whirl and see if they work. And, you know, Liz has now been here for 5 or 6 months. You know, she's more familiar with things, and I think with the ATA coming on soon, you know, maybe they can, because I can't spend time writing scripts. Like, it's just too much, like wordsmithing it. But having somebody in my office, I think, can help with that, and probably work with Lucas and others to try to get out some of those narratives and those video clips, right?
I couldn't agree more. I think these are all great ideas. I do like the idea of the video and the I'm just a bill. I think, could that possibly play on the local access? You know, when we have the
Yes.
freeze frame with the music? Could that I'm just thinking of remember the cheese?
Yeah.
I'm just the hunk of cheese, you know, remember that one with the 10-gallon
Did
hat,
you
5
sing it
gallons
for us?
flat?
I'm not sure I remember.
I was gonna break out into song, but I'm not ready yet. The hanker for a hunk of cheese, yeah.
Your 10-gallon hat is fine.
Yeah, thank you. Well,
That's
you're making my point, Ted, that we still remember these things, and I do think, but that was pushed on us pretty hard. That showed up every other minute on a commercial, so,
every day.
between
That's just
social
your brain
media.
on drugs, right?
Yes,
Like, it's
yes.
actually-
Yeah, you tell one lie, it leads to another. So I think they're, to push this out in some way, but also I think the concept of a video, and I like this idea, I think this is great. So I just wanted to share, I've been thinking about what you said. I think it's a great way to create some accessible information, and I think if it's done and written and produced and from the perspective of a taxpayer who's maybe entering the conversation and hasn't had hours of conversations about this, it's like the right approach, so, anyway.
Yeah.
I also think it'd be
So,
great if
just
we
to-
could put those to combat, dispel some of the like, if we specifically could make an action to go and look, whatever it is, like, I try to stay away from it, frankly, but like, whether it's weekly, or you get assigned a week, or you get assigned a day of the week, and you're looking, and you're not writing a custom answer to each fallacy that's posted. You're just linking, sorry, this was wrong, here's the infographic that explains how it works, done.
Yeah.
Like,
Create
there's
a-
just so much noise that echoes through our town's Facebook group that's just not accurate.
So
It
taking
makes it hard.
a step back, and completely agree with that. You know, if we revise the goal, educate the public on what is, on our local government financial structure using the deputy town administrator and communications department. we're comfortable with that language, that's goal number one.
I think it's important.
There's also a component there of us and our colleagues going out and communicating, sharing that information as well. So, and I do believe the omnibus is necessary, but I love the idea of the monthly focus areas as well. Sorry, Steve, I said your name.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Steve Sherlock, 13 Magnolia Drive, Community Information Director for Franklin Matters. I agree with a lot of his discussion. One caution, and I'm going to just give one other example and then caution you. So the one other key piece that has not been done, to my knowledge, and I may have missed it, I try to catch everything, I don't catch everything. There has not been, especially out of coming this past budget, there were an awful lot of conversations about, we're going to find money, we're going to find money, we're going to find money. Between the FinCom, between the joint budget, between town council, very little was actually found. I've told people, but this body is in a position to say that so that people will pay attention to it. Because whatever else you do, and I agree the goal is the key piece, I'll caution you in trying to get into the implementation details. That's after. Spend time on getting to the goals, and this is a great discussion, but you also need to keep that, you need to close the past and start going forward, because if we don't take 200 at a time, 200 at a time, we're never going to get there. But one of the key pieces is, oh, by the way, there was no found money, right? The budget was validated by everything we did, right? And you can, AAA, the audit, all of those things, this group as the multiple, and then clearly, once that statement is made with joint communications between town and school, everybody can share now the valid, trusted info, and it's not just somebody spitting into the wind, because then nobody's going to listen to him. Thank you.
I just want to, go ahead, you go first.
I think on that notion, I think part of this has to be the goals that we decide are going to help fix this deficit need to be included in whatever we're putting out there. So we can take the community along the way with us so they can see the progress and they can understand the deficit is still very much there.
Yeah.
And these are the steps that we're taking to eventually resolve it, yes.
And I think it's just, at least for me, the first one is education, because we can't close the gap unless we're starting from a similar place. And so we do need to do that education. And simplifying it or making it just very easily accessible is a good way to help us get to the same starting point. Yep. Sorry, Ruth.
I was just going to add to exactly Natalie's point. I think that this body is uniquely comprised of a variation of demographics and representations and interests. So I think us overseeing the creation of that content, like it's created, it would be helpful to include her in our meetings for sure, so that we can kind of.
We can do that.
Yeah, because I think like, and if we have to do that in like, oh, this week, Paul, Steve, and Shannon are the ones who have to like oversee, because then we get like multiple perspective, FinCom, Town Council, School Committee, and then that way, people who hear different things on Facebook or hear, like, they can kind of work that in, because I think we're the representatives that were, mostly elected, so we sort of have the pulse of the community, maybe even a little better than somebody who's just been in this role and is good at content creation and pushing it out, but we actually know a little bit more nuance about what people need to understand.
Well, I think we hear the noise.
Yeah.
We're the ones who hear the noise. So addressing and communicating the actual truths is important, because I think there's, to Brian's point, there's so much misinformation out there that it's up to us to put out the correct information to everyone, and we're the ones who hear all of the noise and know that it's correct information.
So I just didn't want to delegate it without kind of, keeping us plugged in. So.
Ken, I just wanted to add, it's more of an implementation thing in the goals. It doesn't certainly have to be written, but maybe we keep our eye on it. Jamie's point of being able to go out to the public through our affinity groups is very valid, right?
I agree. I don't know that
us being able to get 15 or 20 people at our house to just talk about something is far more powerful than pointing people to Facebook, right? But this group, whether it be you go back and tell everybody at school committee, and we go back and tell everybody at council, and you guys tell everybody at FinCom, like, that's gonna grow, whether you do it at the senior center, or you have it here, or you decide to meet at a restaurant, or you have it at your home. Like, those little community discussions, those little coffee chats, those little, hey, come for a cocktail and sit around my pool, whatever it is. Like, it can't just be, we're gonna try to do this during an override. Like, we nearly need to find all of these different neighborhoods and these champions and have those honest talks as neighbors, because otherwise you still are gonna get 60% of the population that is completely uninformed or uninterested and not come out and vote, right? So let's make the concerted effort to try, maybe it's not right now, but throughout the year, that we're gonna just try to be more intentional with some of these conversations with our friends in our circles. I think that's very, 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 very powerful.
I think that's fair. All right, so we're good on the first goal. Going to the second, which I think speaks to what you'd spoken to earlier, Ted. Creating strategies to solve or close the structural budget deficit, targeting a 3-year window.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're trying to do.
I think that's right. That's what we talked about last time. I think that's the right window.
I agree with the window.
What's that?
I agree with the window.
Yeah, 3 years is probably all we want to do, at least initially. We've got data for 5, but we focus on 3. I think that's good. So now we got to figure out how we're going to do that, right?
Right.
I do want to talk about what does that mean. But first, I want to hear if anybody has any issues with the language there with the board.
So I would wonder if we want to say target, a 2-year window for discussion and a year for implementation, because that's it, right? Like, 3 years in general, we get to the end, we've created a strategy, then what? Or do we want to say we create a strategy in the first 2, and then we lay out an implementation plan that following year where we actually are trying to act on this?
Oh, I feel like I was reading this entirely different. It was create and implement implied a strategy to 0 in 3, like hit 0 at the 3-year mark. Which I think is
Right.
kind of what you're saying. Like,
Yeah,
is it 2
yeah.
strategy and 1 implement? Is it 1 strategy and 2 implement so you can
Is it
grow?
strategy today and then implement the whole time, right?
Yeah,
Right, but that's it, because this is like, all right, so we create, it sounds like that's.
Yeah, it's not
if-
3 years
If we kick out a
creating,
plan
we-
in 3 years,
We should
great,
move.
we've accomplished our goal.
Yeah.
But we haven't actually solved the
Yeah.
problem. So I think if we just narrow that down and say, great, 2 years to create, 1 year to implement, having that as that set, 3 years I think is good. I think everyone's kind of gone on that. But defining the purpose and the actual readouts for each one of those sections.
I don't object, I just don't know right now if 2 years, 1 year's the right mix, but I take your point.
So let's just change the language to
Yeah.
create and implement, and that can be
Yeah.
what we figure out.
Right, because we don't know how long it's going to take to implement whatever we create, and we don't know how long it's going to take to create it.
If it takes us 2 years to create it, it might take longer than a year to implement.
So, but that's part of my thought process is also, we have to worry about change in the next 2 years. So if we're looking at ways to implement or to like develop this strategy over the next 2 years, that also gives us a year into the next cycle to work on implementing. Right? A bunch of us might not be here because of the election cycles. That's what I'm kind of trying to say is, if we have 2 years of planning, it helps us to break over that, and then the implementation falls in the back half of a year for the next group.
I guess
Or the back
maybe
half of the
just
cycle.
taking it apart a little bit. I don't know that we would want to spend any period of time dedicated to creating and then have a hard cut over to implement. I think it needs to be more of an iterative, like, it's a topic we're going to work on. If we come up with a good strategy, we're not going to hold implementation for 2 years.
No,
we would go
no,
forward
just-
on that,
we have
but then
more time,
continue
basically.
iterating to create more. So it's a
And if we come up with multiple strategies and one of them is faster and the other takes more time, we should
Yeah.
have the flexibility to do it.
right. Like, we want the World Cup again next year. We don't need to wait 2 for that.
Even the
Right.
World Cup.
But I think that actually was, I just to make one quick sentence, which is, I think the more germane, I mean, the create strategies, I mean, you can, but I think the more important conversation is, what revenues are y'all gonna raise to fix this? Because if if the option is World Cup parties, just metaphorically, well, then we have to cost that out what it's gonna cost, and then can we show that there's gonna be, is another strategy gonna be the school committee and the town council review their fee structures each year to make sure that we're bringing in the money that we're paying out for referees, cleaning supplies, custodians, et cetera? Are we gonna, I mean, again, just an override is a solution, a debt exclusion is a solution, right? I think a list of revenue options, and then you decide the implementation based off what the committee thinks those choices are realistic, productive, development, right? Like, are we gonna be a joint budget subcommittee that says, you know, we're gonna advocate to make sure that we get the best project at Depot Plaza, right? Because we need revenue, and the residents are angry about development, rightfully so, traffic stinks, but there's a project that may have a domino effect on other buildings downtown, and maybe while we have to talk to residents who are upset about development, I think residents are fine having a conversation like Ted discussed around a pool with martinis. Sounds like the most advantageous. But in all seriousness, like, we have to talk to residents about how small businesses get displaced in a building and how they come back. That's a concern people have brought up during Depot Plaza. But if you don't do those conversations, then you're not gonna increase new growth. Well, maybe that choice is a recommendation. This committee says, you know what, we don't wanna get into that with the public because it's not gonna provide the return on investment we think. Maybe the taxpayers, this came up during Stobart's. I vividly remember sitting here listening to somebody came up and said, if we're gonna get $900,000 in tax base from Stobart's, block the project and put an override out. Right? I mean, it was like I told the guy afterwards, you know, you gotta go get people around that idea if you wanna get that idea. It was a totally legitimate thing. So I think almost it's like you need a charrette or something about what kind of revenues are out there and what are you all comfortable with as a committee fighting for it. The implementation comes almost after that.
So I will say that you keep saying revenues, and I think we do, keeping our eyes open. What are our revenue options? What are our cost reduction options?
I mean, cost reduction, yeah, there's another great thing to add to the list. What are the cost reduction options, right? Yeah.
But
So
ultimately, it's starting with both of with
Correct.
that full list, and then working on which ones we can implement and what kind of timeframes are.
But Ken, I gotta ask, like, I feel like Steve just came up and said this, like, what cost reduction options? Like, I feel like everybody on here just reviewed the whole thing.
If the answer is there are none,
Right.
that's fine, but I think
Right.
we wanna lay it out.
Yeah, I
But
feel
we've done
like
that
you're
for the past 2
opening.
years. Like, we've. to
Yeah, I
this
feel like
point,
you're opening
we've
a
had
door
this
that's
I don't know,
successful.
I don't know that there's much that we can.
Maybe the strategy
No,
is
like-
put out a video about how there's no cost reductions.
Yeah,
Right.
right. The previous
Right. Bill.
CPC went through everything, and we said, look, we
That-
basically
that
tried to
actually
cut our
might
way
be
through.
part of it.
Oh,
And sorry, I'm not trying to like nitpick your language, I just feel like sometimes we say
Just a budget.
cost cutting just to say it,
Nowhere to-
but it's like it's a path we just keep walking, and people just keep saying, well, what if we did cost cutting? But it's like, but
So-
every time we walk it, we get nowhere.
The reason I bring it up is because we've had a number of people who have come up saying, well, there's too much being spent, we need to look at cost cuts. I want us to be clear that we are looking at cost cuts. If, the answer might be that there aren't any that make sense, and I think that's where that is, that's where my head is, but I do want to make sure that people recognize that we're considering that as well. That's why I'm trying to be inclusive there.
Personally, I would like to exclude that from our goals, because I think there are enough committees and reviews of the budget to try to cut things out of it already. And like, we're all part of different ones that try to do that as our mandate, like in different forums. So I don't know that having another group trying to go through the same line items to cut things is gonna get us any further than the same circular conversation we've already had for 3 years or whatever it
I
is.
disagree.
For 20.
I disagree
Yeah, 20.
wholeheartedly. I disagree
20.
because we just got done saying that what our group needs to do is go out into the community to create and implement a narrative of how things are, what we're doing, how we're gonna move forward, what's gonna be different this year. And if our rollout is, but don't talk to us about cuts, we're gonna lose everybody right away.
No, sorry, I'm not saying we won't talk about cuts or educate on cuts. I'm saying that in FinCom, we go after cuts. In town council, we go after cuts, and we should educate the public on those things that happen. But this group shouldn't then call all the department heads back in here and try to cut their budgets, because that's just repetitive.
I
Like,
don't think that's what's
what
on the
would we
table.
be doing?
I don't think that was what was on the
Well,
table.
we're saying we might want to look at cost cuts, but how do you do that without calling all the department heads and going over their budget?
Because
Can I
don't think we've
refocus?
we
We're going
haven't
rogue here.
defined what the problem is. We have gone, number 2 is how to solve it, but we haven't really defined
Right.
what we're solving, which is originally, yes, I understand generically, it's the budget deficit, but we need to the point that I keep making, and maybe I'll just keep saying it, we need to understand where the budgets actually really lie. We need budgets from each department that's a real budget that says if we needed 3 more police officers, we're gonna have to put the capital stuff in the budget. We get 2 police cars every year, so that needs to go in the budget. If the town understands what the real budget is, rather than this shape-shifting version that we have, where later we come back for things and then we have this free cash bucket to put it in. If we understand what the problem is, which is holistically, I'm not talking about a police car, broke down or the fire department blew up. I'm talking about the things that are consistent year over year needs into a budget so we see what the real picture looks like. These projections are great, but if everybody did their budget with their real actual needs, we would be able to present, this is the problem we're trying to solve. This is where the bottom line number is. This is what we're trying to solve. And now, number 2, which would now be number 3, what are the strategies we're gonna do to go about solving it? We don't even know what we're solving for at this point, without clear budgets that don't have things missing out of them that they're gonna ask for later.
So I guess a simple ask there would be retrospective. So this past year, go back, look at the free cash allocations in the capital budget, and pull those exact things out and just put them back into their respective budgets and recalculate what everyone's budget would have looked like.
That's a great idea.
Just nice, because it's all known, like, there's no guessing.
Right.
It's all
We know
there.
exactly
It's
what
all
we
there.
asked for. To your point, some things
Yeah, I
are
do.
consistent. Schools
You
ask
gotta
for
reel it in,
laptops, police cruisers,
Yeah, gotta reel this in.
equipment for, the fire department. All these things do come out of there, and instead of everyone trying to put in for the capital, the free cash, having it in the individual budgets and see what kind of shift we'd see, I think would be a good way to start doing exactly what you suggested.
That's probably the easiest way to go about it. And there was 2 tiers, wasn't there like?
There's like 7
multiple-
tiers. We just didn't
Okay,
talk about the
thousands
rest.
of tiers, but you could
2
fill.
rounds of capital.
2
Right.
rounds of capital.
You could fill all that in, but leaving out like the senior center that had like a $750,000 one-time thing. Like, no one-time
That's like a
things.
true capital
That's
request.
that's capital in the actual
versus
work.
operating.
Then we would have a defined problem. And then we can talk about what our strategies are to solve this problem. I think it would be a lot clearer for the town, because it's really, I'm sorry, I know all the thousands of documents are on there, but it's hard to follow all this. People have lives and kids, and they can't sit and watch hours and hours and hours of these meetings from all the different departments. We have to condense it. We have to be, that should be our mandate. We're from all the different departments. We needed to condense it down to, this is the global look at what our problem is, and these are the things that we have to solve it. We've looked at some
And
budget
we've looked
cuts.
at, and we've looked at costs of
Right.
these other groups. We don't know that, we don't believe that there's
We don't know where we
significant
could cut
cuts.
from here.
So-
If you'd like to look into the budgets, here's a link, and you can help us find a cut.
That's all I'm suggesting. We're not going to bring the
No.
department heads in to go through their budgets.
Just to be
But
clear,
Jen, I know
like,
you had-
that wasn't even, you didn't describe cuts. You described aligning on a model. Like, you described how would we project a model to come to, like, we mentioned a structural budget deficit.
I know.
And you're saying we don't know what the number
We've
is.
lost the whole.
But that's not about finding more cuts. That's about what we include or don't include in the model that gets us a number. And like, I think, Paul would change a percentage here, I had different ones in my model, you wanna have those things. Sure, that number could vary, but it's negative no matter how it varies.
I think it's important that that it's not a separate bucket. I
But-
think it's important that we don't have,
Capital stuff outside, Sure.
regular stuff, and it would be the real look at the real budget.
But that's
And then
not,
solve.
I'm just clarifying that that's not cuts. That's a
Well, I said two
modeling,
statements,
Yeah.
so the second
it's a
statement was.
modeling,
Yep,
where are cuts there?
I said,
No,
and
you're
then
doing
after
great.
we have this, after we have the budget, then we roll out and say, these are some of our ways that we could go about it. We could raise this, then we can talk about our strategies. We could cut here, try to cut, we looked at the police department, for example. And there was nothing to
No
cut.
realistic cuts.
Just to clarify that we are looking at all the things, not just telling the people that, we don't need another budget presentation. We've had all the budget presentations. We can still tell people out loud that we looked at
That we looked
areas
at
to
all the
cut,
things.
and that's gonna garner some credibility, rather than just saying, this is our one solution, it's an override.
Sorry, Jen, I know you were waiting.
Well, I think that we're getting a little into the weeds. So when we talk about, you're doing great though. But when we talk about goals, I think we need to keep a broader vision of what we're working on, because I think that's what you're trying to establish, Ken, not to overstep your chairman roles, because you're doing a great job. But I feel like if we can establish a general goal of what we're looking for, which is obviously to close or reduce the deficit gap, and then underneath that, what are those objectives that we're going to be looking at? We're going to be looking at revenue generating strategies. We're going to be looking at fiscally responsible behaviors, right? So not putting known cost into our capital, right? We're going to be looking at whatever. So those strategies underneath it are going to be those objectives that we're going to take a look at. I think all your points are great, but I think you're diving too deep right now without creating this overall kind of broader sense of the work that we want to accomplish. And, you know, again, when we get into the implementation versus the strategy, it has to be evolving, right? So if we're looking at 3 years, we're looking at 3 years to have these conversations and roll strategies out and adjust as necessary, because no one's perfect. So if we say 2 years for development and 1 year for implementation, that's not realistic. So what are the things that we're looking at? How can we implement our easy hits early on, continuing the education, and then looking at that long-term feasibility of financially responsible decisions that are sustainable, right? Because that's the other piece of this that that we haven't really talked about, is the sustainability of it. So that's just, again, everyone's points were well made, but I think we're getting into these battles over like things that are a little bit too detailed at this point, where we really just need to understand what those broader objectives are, in my opinion.
Also, I guess.
And one more thing, sorry. And then just the thing about to Ted's point about the interest groups and having those conversations, I wholeheartedly agree, but I do believe that whether we use talking points or whether we use, information, it has to be accurate and factual, right? So not to say anything, but when we're making comments up here and I hear some, and then I go in and do like a 2-minute Google search and do some quick numbers, and I look at the impact of what you're saying is driving the budget, it doesn't correlate. So we just have to make sure that when you're giving information and you're talking about requirements and out of district and what those costs are, that you are accurate, because that is what people will then say, oh, well, when I went and looked on the internet, that wasn't accurate. So we just have to make sure that the information that we're providing is accurate and that we all have that same information, because that's where the doubt and the distrust comes from, when people can go out and check those numbers and do the quick math in their head, and it's actually not $2 million that you're trying to find. It's only like a $50,000 increment. And that is impactful for people being able to trust you and have confidence that you know what you're talking about. Now I'm done. Thank you.
I wanted to just add to your point. I think that I don't know if we want to rewrite the second bullet. And to the first bullet, I think the content we put out is going to be manufactured by us. So that should be good. We can be aligned in that way, because that's going to be key. But the strategy, like to your point, the strategy is almost already defined. Like, how do you do it? Cuts, override, revenue, economic development, growth. Like, that's how we do it. So we could almost put, consider all the strategies to bring in more revenue or generate revenue, and then, like, I think we could quickly get to a vote of, can we have a consensus that no one on this committee thinks they're, like, make a motion that, do we all believe there's no cuts available, we can get rid of that one quick, that could be one that we check off the box and we all have like a vote. And then we can, have 2 or 3 different paths off of generating revenue and things like that.
Near-term,
Yeah.
long-term revenue generation.
So it's sort of like we could just explore, instead of being like, what are the strategies? We know what the strategies are, and then just kind of check them off in a group way.
That's kind of what it's less saying, hey, let's go through cuts line by line. It's make sure that we have considered cuts as, right now, we're considering everything. Ultimately, there are some things that will be ruled out because they just don't make sense for Franklin. And we're trying to focus on what does.
So I guess kind of back to the core thing that we were looking at. So on goal number 1, I think we align that the focus is going to be looking at local government finance and budgeting more specifically. So just making that adjustment there. For number 2, it sounds like create and implement strategies to solve and close the structural budget deficit, targeting a 3-year window. So again, keeping that divide broad. Number 3, we haven't touched at all. I think we can keep it simple, just looking at a 10-year capital plan, including infrastructure, which, Gus was here. I know he helped put that in.
Did we decide that we were going to look at the 10-year plan?
We haven't gotten to that. I'm just trying to move things, just trying to see like if we have issues. Assessing the affordability to residents, I think, is a great goal. And honestly, I'd strike 5 entirely because, not to be grouchy about it, but that's y'all's problem, not ours. That's a goal for town council, and I think really keeping those separate, like those are helpful as guiding points for us, but us overall adopting town council goals.
Well, they're all kind of the same, aren't they?
Right, they
5A,
actually
B, and
kind of
C,
feed
or
into-
1, 2, and 3.
Right. So it like we have some overlap there, but just the wording with that, it's like, yeah, so town council accepted those, and therefore there are goals, I think. We would just strike 5
So
altogether.
one thing that's not on here that I had on my notes from our last conversation is creating guidelines for town council and FinCom for our budgetary approach. And I think that had to do with making sure OpEx is OpEx, CapEx is CapEx, getting that, as part of our implementation plan in the long term, recognizing we're not gonna make all the changes next year. Ultimately, with the goal of moving away from our consistent reliance on free cash.
Just to back up for a quick second on capital, is that a town council responsibility, or is that a joint committee? I'm open to discuss that, I just don't know.
In terms of capital expenses, or?
Yeah.
We spend a lot of them, so I think we definitely share that responsibility. It is, when it comes to a vote, obviously, y'all are the final say. But there's a lot of shared capital expenses, I think, across the town between all the different facilities, the schools, and the town. So I think that is definitely a shared item. Actually, I was talking a little bit with Brutus about that earlier today.
FinCom also reviews them through the free cash allocations as well
So it's
as
one.
making recommendations.
Do we have a capital plan, like a replacement schedule or anything?
It was linked on the agenda. If
It's-
you go to that,
Yeah.
somewhere in one of the appendices, they've got the fleet schedule for each department, when they get replaced, and it's all laid out over like some of their 10-year, 15-year plans.
Brutus laid everything out for a long period of time.
It's terrifying.
200 million.
It is it's incredibly terrifying.
Sorry, Ted.
No, it is incredibly terrifying. When you look at the infrastructure needs of the town and what's been unable to be paid for decades, that's just compounding. So, but to Shannon's point, something that so refreshing to hear it said by yet another person, but we've been talking in the capital subcommittee meetings for years about trying to extract recurring expenses and make them in the actual operating budget so that capital can focus on the larger, big picture things in the town, fix a school roof, fix a road, fix something major so that you don't have to go do a debt exclusion. We've been unable to actually make that a reality, but I think maybe chipping away at it a little bit at a time, like maybe we're not able to fully extract everything. That's just going to be unrealistic, and it's going to put the departments in a really bad position, and it's going to add to that $1 million deficit number substantially. But maybe we say, yeah, okay, we're going to focus on, these 3 things that we're comfortable recommending that we're putting them into the operating budget, and here's our solution to pay for it. And eventually, it does show people in the community that, yeah, you know what, these things really do belong there. It's just these departments have never been able to pay for it. Safety equipment for the police and fire should never be a capital thing. It should always be in their budget because they need it to do their job, right? A teacher needs a laptop to do his or her job, right? These are things that, and books, kids need books to learn, right? They're not like, but we've forced these departments to take them out of their budgets and put them over in capital and pray to God that we're gonna have the money in free cash to fund them. Like, it's a strange strategy, but it's what we've had to do. So I do agree that at least, I mean, some things are, they're too large to move over, like police cruisers and DPW trucks, and they probably have to be on a capital schedule because they're just, you know, it's $100,000 for a police cruiser, just one, right? And it's $1 million for a fire truck. Like, those things are difficult to put into operating, even though they're necessary for those people to do their jobs.
But if
right?
you have them as stable things in there, again,
Yeah.
with the police cruisers, they're annual.
Right.
So to that, like,
They should be in the
I think as
operating
soon as we start picking and choosing and saying, well, but this is okay here, but like,
Yeah.
you guys really shouldn't be doing it, you should, to Shannon's point, everything goes in. For something like DPW, I think you have the schedule, Brutus has put that whole schedule out. Average to the next 5 years, I know I keep on saying don't do this, but like, just pick some kind of, like, great, we have 2 heavy trucks, 1 plow, a couple of light trucks, and a lawnmower.
Now we need the infographic
Now-
though on the enterprise funds to explain.
Divide
all those trucks into
The idea is
pieces and only pay for the back.
if we get into the situation where we spend all of our time saying, here's the reasons we didn't include these things here, and here's the reasons we included it here. Oh yeah, well, you know, a laptop's important, but the police cruiser is not. It's like, well, I can teach a kid without the laptop in certain settings. Like, great, you can share a laptop, or you can sit there and you work, where the teacher's laptop is very critical. But it's gonna be really interesting to watch a cop chase down somebody going 40 on his
Bicycle.
Oh, bicycle, that's even better. But like, that's the idea, is we
Yeah.
need to make sure that if we're gonna do that, we go full out.
But so Ken, I think, summarized it in the beginning, and maybe we missed it, but it was just adding a goal, right, of make a recommendation to.
Create guidelines for town council of FinCom.
Yeah.
Right, like
For
guidelines too, and then Ted, I think you're in like the strategic, like we probably don't just do that once. It's probably just a mandate here, where each year we're refining that, because you can't move it all today.
No, because it would literally be millions of dollars.
But you could move to
But,
tasers
hey,
today.
This is our
Yeah.
approach. We're heading here, and this is the 3-year plan or the 10-year plan, whatever, but moving to put things in the right buckets. Sorry,
So,
George.
I just,
Oh,
one
sorry.
thing on this sticking all of the capital items into the budgets, okay? Thanks, Steve. You buy a police cruiser, it's not gonna last 5 years, and we're gonna expense it all in 1 year? We gotta have some method to actually charge the expense when it happens. We have to put out the cash, and that could really put things out of whack. I mean, we spent $293,000 on cruises this year, but they're gonna last 5 or 6 years.
But how many did you, so I guess to that point, how much did you spend on them the year before that and the year before that? I remember seeing
Right.
something similar
It was
each year.
less
Yeah,
than
they
four-
they last 5
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
That's great, but you
Every
crash
year.
a couple.
But the
you,
point is,
like-
yeah, so
every
it
year
is
you
different
find
numbers
out.
every year, but the point is to budget for your known average. And then if it's an abnormal year because 3 extra broke because, I don't know, then you come for free cash to say, hey, we need to get out of jail because something weird happened. But if you know you need 3 cruisers every year because you have 64 cruisers and you divide it by whatever it is, right? Like, you can do that math and say, this is the average, and we're never going to spend less than the average over a period of time. And if you put too much in the budget, it comes back anyway.
Changes it.
Or-
I think it requires some more discussion than
Sure.
we're gonna put all the cruises in the budget.
So take a step back.
Or
You
whatever.
know, I think we're on the same page that, we want to set guidelines. The question is, there is detail, there's discussions to be had about what
Start small.
specifically those guidelines are. But, are we, folks generally agree that setting the guidelines should be one of the goals?
And I do agree with the point about taking number 5 off, because I think
I don't disagree with that.
it's kind of,
So Shannon
it's
was
kind of
next.
redundant.
I'm trying to,
I-
you were next, so go ahead.
okay.
One of you,
It's just a,
Yeah.
yeah, Spider-Man meme.
Yeah.
It's just a quick point of clarification to make sure I understand what order we're going in here. So number 1 is educate the public, right? Number 2 is solutions. But we didn't, again, we didn't define what the problem is. That's what the part I'm having a hard time getting past. You can't have a solution if you don't know what the problem is.
So my thinking on that is that's where the budget, the 5-year plan comes in, where we see that deficit. So it's a little bit, it's kind of working with that, recognizing that it's not set in stone.
So what I'm
It's
saying is,
close.
why wouldn't one of our goals be to define for the community what the problem is? Before we give the community what the solutions
I see what
are.
you're saying. So
That's what I'm
2
saying.
could be,
Define the problem.
you know, problem that, like, that's another part of education a little bit, but yes, you know.
I think the
I mean, education
education
is just the broad.
is the
but-
broad, like, this is how budgets work, and when you pay your water bill, it doesn't just go to Jamie and he writes a check for pencils. Like, I think that's not very well-known. I think there's the broader education part of it, and then there's defining the problem we're solving. Whereas if we just go right to solutions,
To
I don't
solve the
think
structural
that's-
deficit though, isn't that the thing we're doing? Like,
No, so she's saying you can't
What's
close
this?
something you don't know what's open. Like,
Right.
which door is open, we don't know, so how do we close it?
Right.
I totally agree, like,
What
you know,
language do you
maybe,
want?
So is
maybe
that-
said differently, it's
is
a
it
line
really-
on a model. It's a
Right.
line on a model that we think lays out our best guess for the next, whatever it is, 3 or 5 years. But if we aren't aligned on the model, we can't align on the number we're trying to solve for. So then when we say,
Then how do
target
we
0 in 3 years,
Socialize-
we don't know what that number
So
is.
is it essentially socialize and educate the town on the 5-year?
No,
I
no,
don't
no,
think
no,
that
no.
it's it's not the
Socialize.
educating.
Okay, maybe take away that.
It's not social, it's not anything, we would eventually be able to present it to the town.
Yeah.
But if this is our goals, right, this is a list of our goals.
Mm-hmm.
So our goals are to educate the public, create this little, I'm just a bill. Our second goal is to, among ourselves, align on what the problem is.
I like the way you said that, yes, align.
Then, number
Yeah.
2, solve the problem we just created. Well, that would be
Aligned
number
on.
3. That we aligned on, sorry.
Aligned on. We didn't create.
We did not create it, sorry for the record. Through the chair, for the record, we didn't create it. We need a goal to establish the
To
problem,
just, to make sure we're all aligned on the.
on what the
defined
actual problem is. That's
How
number
long is the
2.
race before we start running?
And number 3 is create strategies to solve said problem that we did not create.
Yeah.
Does anyone object to that?
Makes sense.
I think it makes sense.
You just really want to have 5 goals, don't you?
Listen, I'm gonna shoehorn a couple more in
Actually,
here.
I'm gonna jump in. Does anybody
Let's get
object
pencils.
to
That
crossing
can be
off
on
the
there.
5 ABC? Because I.
No.
No.
Can I
So-
jump in quick before you go on to the next one? So I just think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind is we are a advisory body that represents people, right? But one of the big things that I heard you say, not intentionally, but like we have to align, we are only part of a broader community. And a budget is a reflection of the priorities of the community or an organization. So I guess part of the presentations, when we did the strategic, Ted, what were the people that came out for you? The 3 presentations, do you remember?
Strategic plan?
Yeah, one of the things that they.
sorry, yeah.
Was that what they were, the
I
strategic
just
planning?
think so.
The strategic plan.
Yeah, so when they came out, they talked about understanding your community, right? Understanding the wants and needs and the priorities, and then specifically understanding the people that didn't vote for the override. That was the focus for a couple of them. So I think one of the things that we're kind of missing here is where is that input? Have we done surveys to talk about what is the priority of our communities? Because we can sit here all we want and we can decide that we want to fully fund this, this, and this, but if that is not what the priority is of our community, it's not going to matter. So I think another piece for me would not just be the education piece, is that voice piece, right? So what is the priority of our community? Because a budget should reflect what a community or an organization is focused on. So I think that's another piece of it, and not that I don't think we have an obligation as a committee to come together and talk about solutions and steps, but we're gonna be spinning our wheels if our solutions and steps don't align with what the broader community has an interest in.
I completely agree. That's an excellent.
I think
Thank
you nailed
you.
it, too.
Additional point.
You nailed it when you said wants and needs, because that's the big debate, right? I obviously, my head goes like, we're gonna need an override. I always think it's gotta be three choices, yes, yes, and no. Yes needs, yes wants, and maybe our committee's purview needs to help extract what that difference is, because we may not be able to come up with what the structural budget deficit is if we don't understand there's definitely going to be diverse opinions of that.
Is there a way for us to work that into the, number 4, the assess the affordability of residents?
Oh,
Oh, that's a good
yes.
idea. That's the same kind of thing.
Are we really like averse to going to 6 goals?
I mean, again, I don't know if it's about-
Line on
I think
5?
5 is duplicate.
Right, and I don't think it's about
Yes, I agree with you.
affordability, because, you know,
No,
like,
no, I agree.
No,
like,
but
I
assess.
think it's what's your priority. Like, for me, like, I have a monthly budget personally, and I can afford whatever. But I have a priority as to what I'm spending my money on. And that priority is based on my area of preferred topics, right? And I think our community has that as well. So we just assume when we're making this budget, and I'm not, like, this is not a negative, but we assumed when we talked about the override last time, that people would get behind schools, right? And we talked a lot about schools, the schools need the money. Yeah, but that's what you thought, but did everyone else feel that way? So I do think it's really important that our community has a say in this, and that they are able to express what they feel. Maybe they want to invest a ton of money in the senior center. Maybe they want to invest a ton of money in the library. But you have to be reflective of that, because if you're asking people to vote on strategic changes, whether it's an override or cuts or anything else, you have to understand what the priorities of that community are. Otherwise, it's a waste of our time.
Maybe
So
that's
if we-
assess goals.
Assess priorities.
Priorities and
affordability
affordability of residents. It's a great point.
I love, I like that as a goal. I wonder if anyone has any issues with that. I don't yet know how we would actually implement that, but before I get to that, any issues with changing number 4 to reassess priorities and affordability of residents?
It sounds great, I can't argue with it. Like you say,
But same with me, not sure how
how
to
do
do
you
that.
do it, and what constitutes a majority?
Well, like,
Don't
so-
we learn those same things?
Isn't some of the implementing, all of us here, like, we have a pretty broad age range, we have a pretty broad demographic, kids at school, like, we represent the community by being here and not being uniform in nature. So could we get more structured in a survey or something like that? Like, possibly, and we can certainly talk about that and figure out how to do some of that. But we also, like, that's why we're here. That's what we're bringing to being in the room to a degree, is a variety of perspectives. So I do think it kind of ties into the, like, a line on the projection of what things are we saying we want to project higher, and if we don't all agree, right? If you know, you want to project the library as climbing in cost because we want to make a great library, but not everybody up here wants to do that, then maybe we don't make the projection look that way. And if we're unsure, then maybe we table some of those things and work towards getting more community sure, because this group wasn't sure, right, what the community's priority was. And I think there's going to be certain line items where then the solution maybe has to be tailored to the line item, right? For the library, maybe it's we go to the library and ask what the people there, you know, want more or don't have enough of or whatever. But if it's something more broad, you know, maybe it's a email survey or a come speak with us on X night or whatever else.
Or maybe it's both.
Sure, yeah.
And I think the department heads have good insight also. I mean,
We
what people
want
want.
their input,
Yeah.
I wouldn't rely on it completely, but yes, absolutely want their.
I was just gonna remind everybody that we do have a master plan. That a year and a half, it's 40-something pages, right? An awful lot of people weighed in. There was surveys, there were community meetings, there was discussions. Those folks worked really, really hard. So I think we have a roadmap. I don't want to dismiss anybody's ideas, but we have a roadmap, and we have what the community has come out and stated are their priorities and their wants. We just need to listen to it so it's not getting dust on a shelf. I think to some degree people might be a little surveyed out, quite honestly, but there still could be discussions, there still could be some other priorities out there that maybe we're not even aware of. But there are some very key reasons why people move to Franklin, and there's some very key reasons why people stay in Franklin. And we know that that's our schools, and we know that that's our safety And then it starts to get into other things like our beautiful facilities and fields and our low tax rate, right? Like, we know that is not a secret, that you could ask 100 people that moved to Franklin this year, what attracted you to town? And all of them are gonna say the exact same things. So, and then we have to look at, okay, we have a great number of people who have lived here for an awfully long time that don't leave for a whole variety of reasons, but their priorities might be a little bit different than the people that have just moved here, right? And they're, we've debated it as a council publicly too, right? Like, somebody coming in and the average price of a home in Franklin's now over $700,000, right? So their priorities and their financial outlook is very different than somebody that bought a ranch for 45 grand 30 years ago. So we have to, and I don't want to get into the weeds, but I do think when we start to look at that affordability, accessibility, priority, whatever words you want to start to do, we have to look at the master plan, and then we have to maybe form some focus groups with some different folks that we haven't heard from.
I think budgetary priorities are different. I understand what you're saying, but I do think that budgetary are different. Because when you're looking at your master plan, that was a survey about what you value in your community, but it wasn't necessarily tied to what are you willing to put money towards out of your pocket, right? That's a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't want to confuse people, I think, but I do think there's a way that we could not have to do yet another study and yet another survey and yet another compilation of data. I think there's a way we could use what we have and maybe find a few ways to add to it, right?
Maybe it's enough to look at the first two things, come up with this education program, and then let's look at defining the problem, as Shannon said, in some detail. And we'll have a lot of debate around what's included, what's not included. We have Jamie's 5-year forecast here, and it sounds like we're saying that's not accurate enough, maybe? Or we want to add more things to that? Or we want to collaborate a little bit more on...
We want some historical reference on that, I think that's...
Well, we want historical reference, we want maybe to add operational line items in there from that are now capital, right? It's kind of what I'm hearing, so like this forecast is going to look a lot different. So the deficit's going to be a lot higher as we kind of add some of this stuff through there. Maybe it comes down here or there, whatever, but I don't know. Are we comfortable using this 5-year forecast? It sounds like to me what I just heard over the last couple hours is we need to change that to reflect what we discussed earlier. Yeah?
I think that sort of sounds what Shannon was saying, is solving the problem and defining the problem is part of the problem that we have. We're solving capital expenses with free cash, and the operating expenses are not in the operating budget. So I think that all just ties into what is the problem and how do we solve the problem.
Let me ask this, because I think that 5-year forecast is a good starting place and worth having. Is it possible to also have the alternate forecast, let's call it, that includes the operational items that have been include some of the other pieces that we've been leaving out? Does that make sense?
Yeah, we could do 2 budgets and.
Because that'll allow us to.
What you see tonight, I can tell you, is probably within a pretty solid margin of error of what I would file in March. Those numbers are really good. I mean, again, if the school said we wanted 3%, it takes 2 seconds in a spreadsheet to change it. If healthcare goes down a little bit, but the percentage is 9%, I mean, by the time I get to April, I'll have all the letters from all the entities for pensions, and you put the actuals in there. You see what the deficit is, 700,000, 1.1 million, like whatever. So I'm just saying, from an actual implementation of a no-cuts budget like this past year, you got a pretty good idea. You could add in, like Ted has been saying and many others, like the wants or the other gaps. If y'all define like capital should be part of recurring for tasers and yeah, the cruisers last 5 years, but every year the chief asks for 5 cruisers. Every year the superintendent asks for 2 special education vans. Every year the technology director asks for, laptops and, and he told us the other day, he's gonna take the entire capital budget this year at their department heads meeting because he's been backed up so far, and I believe him that, the numbers are gonna be big. So I think one thing you just have to concern is, do you start making a deficit like so big that you start concerning people and you start working the narrative the other way? But to your point, Mr. Chairman, we can create 2 budgets. That's very easy to do. Here's the realistic nuts and bolts, the level service budget, basically. And then also, where do you want to be? And you can model out FY28. In an optimum world, and we could have the things that we really need. I think the things I just mentioned weren't wants, those are needs,
Yes.
right? Special education
We need
vans,
a needs budget.
curriculum investments every 3 years, or an unfunded mandate, whatever they are, we can try to map that out. Those numbers are gonna be very large. At the end of the day, the message to the community needs to be, the pie is not big enough to pay for everything that people want.
Maybe we should start with. So if we have this is our forecast budget, this is what we're working on. This is what we actually need.
Right.
That we're not even doing. We're not even gonna bother showing you the wants, because we're nowhere near.
We're nowhere near that.
So,
Yeah.
so if we do that,
Yeah.
that gives us something to work with.
Absolutely.
So, if our focus is then, let's close the gap, here's our three-year plan, and we're shooting for the actual, and would love to be able to to get somewhere close on the needs.
Yeah.
That's something we can start to work.
And then you can apply, I think if that's the problem, then you can apply the strategy list.
Right.
Which really need, and I'm not saying go through the exercise, you really need to just have a list of, a brain dump of thoughts and ideas that people have, right? This gets back to
And
the
that's
exercise
us,
at
and
Finance
that's
Committee
the
that Ryan led. It's like, okay, let's just go through it all and everybody just speak their mind of what they want to address. Like, just take a few hours or a couple hours. And then the group has to kind of whittle those down, and what are the realistic ones that can try to achieve what the needs list is, once you have that number. So I think that's a reasonable, I think we could probably pull all that together probably by the end of the calendar year type of schedule, right? Like, if you have another couple meetings, we can put some stuff together, and then you guys can go through and prioritize some of the goals, probably through December. And then maybe that sets you up for January when the governor puts out, their budget, and then you kind of take it from there. From just a timing perspective.
All right, what's missing?
Can I just add one thing?
Please.
I think sort of in the back of all of this, we also need to be thinking about debt exclusions, because they are still part of the conversation.
Yeah.
As much as we're working on the operational budget, you can't just forget about debt exclusions, because they're very real and they are part of people's lives.
So based on the comments tonight, here's what I'll do. I have a list over here, including debt exclusion, some other thoughts I had on revenues, like fees and things. And maybe for the next meeting or next couple meetings, I'll just jot down and start a list based on what I've already heard tonight. And then I think an agenda item you'd want to do is add more to that list of options, right? They could be small revenue sources, like the parties. But they all add up.
So,
But they all
High
add
school
up.
gym.
in terms of moving forward on this list, that first one, the educate the public on financial structure, Deputy Town Administrator, Communications Department, would love to see some progress on that, but when would we, the Deputy Town Administrator can't start until October or something.
It depends on the candidate and a few things, depends on the salary offer, but, there's a plausibility, it could be as early as your, mid-September meeting, which is on the 16th. I'm just trying to do the best I can to get somebody started, because I also go away on October 2nd. But, I'm thinking in that mid-September council meeting is likely when the introduction will be. So Liz can start on some of these concepts.
We can also,
Yeah.
if we
Pretty-
have
pretty
notes,
quickly.
you can feed them into AI and get a conceptual, whatever
Yeah.
you want, that we can give to the new person when they show up in January, and they'll be
It's just
off
that
to
I
the
would
races.
love to see us start making progress on
Okay.
that, because
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah.
we, but I think could be potentially powerful.
Liz and I have already talked about these kind of we've talked about, her and I talked about Schoolhouse Rock too, like, I was trying to convey, because it's so memorable. But her and I have talked about this, I think she has talked a little bit to maybe even Liz at Franklin TV about putting these up on on the screen and stuff. So I think this is a conversation she's already aware of, so I'll talk to her tomorrow about what would 1 or 2 clips take to
And can we
funnel
have a
into AI
brand?
maybe, or infographics, or just something.
And can
What
Lucas
does that
sing the
take?
theme song? Because
I'm sorry.
I thought I was singing with these songs.
You brought up the cheese guy.
I'm the proprietary ownership. I'm just a budget, all right?
I think we need a brand though, like,
Yeah.
this is from Money Matters Mondays or something like.
That's a good
Right.
idea.
Just keep your radio skinny.
But,
You don't need to turn
other than that,
orange
I think we've had a number
cheddar.
of good ideas. I really like the idea of the omnibus approach, as well as that, the periodic updates on, periodic deep dives on specific areas. Because that'll help us, and also give us something to point to when there's untruths that we can correct. All right, taking a step back. You know, we talked about it. I think we're still at, I actually think we're still at 4 or 5 goals. You know, 1, 2, and 3 are probably the closest to us, the ones we can start working on most in terms of education, in terms of definition, and in terms of starting to brainstorm strategies. You know, I think assessing priorities and affordability is something we should keep on here, but we need more discussion as to how we're going to define that. And then the 10-year capital plan, including infrastructure, is something that's, you know, that's important, but probably a little bit later in our tenure. In my mind.
Definitely.
So,
Sounds good.
I don't think we have the language yet to vote on it, or what do you think?
Either you wanted, what I was thinking was I'll just tomorrow, or I'll just edit the Google Doc. Do you want me to send it out to a few folks? Do you want to make some suggested edits, and then at the next meeting, it might be the first thing you just try to ratify
just try and-
quickly.
and
Yeah,
be done
quick,
with it.
be done with it, and
If
just go from
we
there.
could for the next meeting, knock that out and then
Yep.
start on, you know, what progress we have on
Education
number
and-
1 and
Yep.
2.
Perfect.
Yeah, can we invite Liz to the meeting, next meeting?
Please.
Yeah, I can ask Liz to come. Yeah, sure.
We'll make
Absolutely.
her go to every meeting, but ours is.
I mean, you might have the
focused.
deputy by then too, depending on when you schedule the next meeting. I mean, September 16th is, you know, really a month away, so unless you meet within the month, you might be able to have them there as well.
To Ruth Ann's point, I do think it's important for them to understand the tone in which we're trying to project this, not from their high-level understanding,
Yeah.
but to make it simpler for people.
And
so-
fun.
And fun.
And fun. I know.
It is fun. We have fun every day.
That's what I call it, enterprise funds.
Every time I swing by this office, I don't see half.
They look like they have a glass.
Fun and fun.
No D.
Putting the fun in enterprise funds.
I do think fun is a key factor of engagement. I think,
Yeah.
you know, it gets too dry, too
Too
terminology dense, you know, and
Yeah.
it's got to start to be more fun.
Humor works.
Humor wins. Well said.
Here's to fun.
Here's to fun.
Motion to adjourn?
Non-debatable.
Oh, she needs a second.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Don't we need a second?
Second.
So moved, non-debatable, right? Okay.